Collier never expected that a regular grocery store stop would throw his entire world off balance, but that was exactly what happened on a warm Sunday afternoon. The kind of afternoon where everyone else seemed relaxed, except him. He had just stepped out of his car, key still in his hand, when his entire body froze. Across the parking lot, he saw Elise. Not the Elise he had first met years ago in Maureen's school office. Not the soft-spoken teacher who helped him rebuild his life. This Elise was shaking, clutching Maureen's hand as if she was shielding her from something. And then he heard it. Maureen, with tears streaking her cheeks, whispering, "Dad, please don't be mad." Before Collier could even respond, his eyes shifted and locked onto the last person he ever expected to see there, Vanessa. Except this wasn't the glamorous Vanessa who once walked red carpets beside him. This Vanessa looked exhausted, pale. Her hair unkempt, mascara smudged, chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. But what struck Collier more was that she was hiding something behind her back. Something, or someone. Then she stepped aside. And that's when he saw her. A teenage girl, 16, maybe 17, but what mattered wasn't her age. It was her face, his exact jawline, his eyes, even the faint dimple he had passed down to Maureen. Collier's heart slammed against his ribs. The girl looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope, as if she'd spent years rehearsing this moment and praying it would never happen. Collier's voice cracked as he whispered, Why does she look exactly like me?" The teenager flinched, just slightly, but enough to tell him she had been carrying a truth too heavy for someone her age. Behind him, a shopping cart rolled into a bumper, a small metallic sound that somehow felt louder than thunder. His entire world shifted in those few seconds. And before he could even breathe, Vanessa dropped to her knees in the middle of the parking lot and began sobbing uncontrollably. None of this was supposed to happen. She cried. Her voice echoed off parked cars and spilled into the heavy silence around them. Elise stepped forward, trembling. "Collier, please. Maureen is scared." Maureen clung to Elise's leg, crying harder now. Then the teen girl gathered her courage, stepped closer, and said the words that shattered the last pieces of Collier's reality. "I think you're my father." In that instant, everything inside him collapsed, not just because of what she said, but because deep down, in the part of himself he never wanted to revisit, he knew there was only one point in his past that could have made this possible. This moment in a grocery store parking lot wasn't just shocking, it was the collision of every mistake, every regret, and every truth he had tried to bury. Collier stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe, as the world around him blurred. Cars passing, doors closing, people walking by. None of it mattered, because the real storm wasn't happening outside. It was happening inside him. And in that moment, a question rose inside him, one he had spent years avoiding. Have you ever been confronted with a truth so heavy, it rewrote everything you believed about yourself? His hands trembled, because this wasn't just about a missing piece of his past. This was about a life, a young life, shaped without him. A life that carried his features, but not his name. A life that had grown up wondering about a man who never even knew she existed. Another question tore through him. Have you ever realized your mistakes didn't just cost you peace? They shaped a child's entire childhood. He stared at the teenage girl, her eyes too familiar, her expression too fragile. Behind him, Maureen's sobs grew louder, and Elise tried to soothe her, voice cracking despite her calm exterior. Elise wasn't just trying to protect Maureen. She was bracing herself too, because she could feel Collier changing in real time. And Collier felt the deepest question of all press against his chest. Have you ever discovered that love, real love, didn't come from the place you expected, but from the person you once overlooked? Every memory, every choice, every regret he thought he'd buried was clawing its way to the surface. And he knew, right there in that grocery store parking lot, that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. For a split second, Collier thought the world had gone silent, but it hadn't. It was Vanessa. She staggered forward, rain-mixed tears streaking down her face. The same woman who once walked through luxury galas with perfect posture now on the edge of collapse. Her makeup was smudged, her voice shaking, her breath uneven. She fell to her knees, right there, in front of everyone. This wasn't supposed to happen. She cried, clutching something behind her back as if trying to hide proof of a mistake too big to confess. Elise stepped in front of Maureen instantly, her hands trembling, her body shielding the child out of instinct, out of love, out of fear of what could explode next. Maureen grabbed Elise's waist and buried her face, shaking. People nearby slowed their steps, sensing something was wrong, but Collier saw nothing except the teenage girl, the one who mirrored his younger self so precisely it punched the air out of him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I think you're my father." Collier felt the ground tilt, his heartbeat thudded in his ears, and a cold realization washed over him. He wasn't losing his world. He was watching it split open. Behind him, Maureen sobbed harder. Elise held her close, trying to steady her own breathing. And Vanessa, broken, shaking, overwhelmed, kept repeating, "It wasn't supposed to be like this. None of it, none of it." For the first time in years, Collier was truly afraid. Not of losing money, not of losing status, but of losing the truth that could either save his family or tear it apart forever. Collier's throat tightened as he stared at the girl who carried his eyes, his jawline, even the same nervous way he used to tug at his sleeves when he was unsure. Everything around him slowed. Maureen clung to Elise, trembling. Vanessa cried into her palms, shoulders shaking violently. And that teenage girl, with truth burning in her eyes, took a breath that seemed to tear her apart and whispered, "I didn't mean to ruin anything. I just needed to know who I am." Those words hit Collier harder than any betrayal he had ever survived. Elise stepped closer, voice barely steady. "Collier, what do you want us to do?" But he had no answer, not yet, not when his entire life had just changed in a single minute. Because now the biggest question of all stood in front of him. Was this the moment that destroyed his family? Or the moment that finally revealed the truth that had been buried for years? Stay with me as we go back to where it all began. The heartbreak, the choices, the broken bond, the love that healed them, and the truth that nearly tore everything apart. Welcome back to Mr. Michael Stories. I'm Michael, and here we explore stories that don't just entertain. They teach, they touch the heart, and they remind us how fragile and powerful family can be. If you're new here, this is a space where we reflect on life's twists, our deepest mistakes, and the unexpected people who help us rise again. This story is one of love, loss, responsibility, healing, and how a single moment can change everything. Before we continue, please hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. It truly helps YouTube show stories like this to more people who may need the lessons inside them. Collier never imagined his name would one day be connected to a broken home, a fractured marriage, and a daughter who carried more emotional weight than any child should. Years before the chaos, he had pictured a future that looked clean, predictable, and controlled, a family that reflected success, stability, and pride. But the truth was far from that polished image. What grew inside the mansion wasn't peace. It was pressure, distance, coldness, and a bitterness that slowly strangled every ounce of love. It all began long before the arguments, long before the legal threats, long before Maureen cried herself to sleep thinking she had ruined everything. It began when Collier, a young man with ambition burning in his chest, convinced himself that building a legacy required sacrificing everything in his path, including the woman who once believed she was his partner. When Collier met Vanessa, he saw possibility. She came from a world he had never been part of, a world of affluent families, polished manners, and people who never worried about bills or broken cars. Vanessa embraced that world with ease, and Collier admired the confidence she carried like perfume. He was not born into that world. Collier came from a small white suburban neighborhood, where success was measured by a decent job and not making the local newspaper for anything embarrassing. His parents were stable, strict, and proud of discipline. Vanessa's family, on the other hand, believed in image, influence, and social standing. When Collier married her, he stepped into a life of galas, fundraising dinners, luxury resorts, and conversations about stocks and business alliances that felt more like chess matches than family gatherings. At first, the differences didn't matter. For a while, they were just a young couple intoxicated by promise. Vanessa believed in Collier's drive. Collier believed in Vanessa's loyalty. But when his tech startup exploded into national recognition, when investors called at all hours, when business meetings pulled him across the country, when success demanded more from him than he anticipated, the marriage began to shift. Vanessa went from being proud of his ambition to feeling abandoned by it. Collier went from admiring her support to quietly resenting her need for his time. Still, both pretended everything was fine, because that's what wealthy couples in their world did. Smile for photos, act perfect, and push problems into silence. Until silence became the loudest thing in their home. Maureen was the center of both their worlds in the beginning. When she was born, Collier swore he would be the father he wished he'd had. Affectionate, present, emotionally open. But as years passed, the pull of ambition took over. The more success he achieved, the more meetings he accepted. He promised Vanessa he'd slow down after the next milestone. But there was always another. That's when Vanessa started to interpret his absence through a darker lens. She never shouted at first. She sighed. She asked cutting questions. She made small comments like, "You always have a meeting, Collier. You think money is raising this child?" You forgot her recital again. Little by little, warmth dissolved. Maureen noticed before Collier did. Her drawings stopped having both parents in them. Her teacher sent notes home about her becoming withdrawn. She started hesitating before running toward Collier on weekends, as if waiting to see whether he was in one of his distant moods. Vanessa felt alone. Collier felt misunderstood. So they argued, then avoided each other, then argued again, and that cycle carved emotional trenches into the heart of their young daughter. Vanessa's resentment grew slowly, then sharply. She started filling the empty spaces Collier left with statements meant to comfort herself, but they struck Maureen like invisible punches. "Your daddy is too busy for us. He loves work more than he loves me. I don't know why he even bothers coming home sometimes. If he cared enough, he'd be here." Collier never heard these words directly, but he felt the result when Maureen's hugs became shorter, when her smiles dimmed, when her eyes filled with confusion every time he said he loved her. The alienation wasn't loud, it was quiet, and that made it more damaging. Collier's world amplified the divide. Every week he stood inside glimmering boardrooms, surrounded by men in tailored suits who spoke in sharp numbers and long-term strategies. They talked partnerships, stock shifts, acquisitions, next fiscal outcomes, and they celebrated deals with champagne and private lounges. He didn't enjoy any of it, but he convinced himself it was necessary. If he didn't stay ahead, he would fail. If he slowed down, his entire empire could crumble. So he attended the events. He wore the smile. He let business swallow his time. Vanessa, raised in a similarly polished world, expected attention, romance, and emotional investment. But the more Collier succeeded, the more she felt like a shadow in her own home. She tried to tell him. Night after night, she sat across the dining table while he typed on his laptop. She lay awake as he arrived home past midnight, exhausted and offering excuses. She cried in the bathroom when he scheduled yet another business trip. During a week, she begged him to stay home. Eventually, Vanessa's tears turned into coldness, a coldness their mansion echoed back. What began as sadness shifted into anger. Vanessa started believing her own worst thoughts. He doesn't value me. He doesn't value Maureen. He only cares about himself. He's going to leave us eventually. And once she believed these things, she acted on them. She stopped trying to make the marriage work. She stopped considering Collier a partner. She stopped giving him grace, patience, forgiveness. Instead, she prepared emotionally and quietly to walk away. By the time the divorce papers were delivered, her resentment was already fully formed. But the worst part wasn't how she turned on Collier. It was how she dragged Maureen into the emotional battlefield. The night everything broke was painfully quiet. Collier returned home around 10:30 p.m., worn down from a meeting. He barely noticed the untouched dinner on the table. He headed upstairs to check on Maureen. Her bedroom door was slightly open. He pushed it gently. That's when he heard it. Soft, muffled sobbing. The kind that shakes the whole body. Maureen lay curled under her blanket, clinging to her stuffed bunny like it was a life raft. Her small shoulders trembled. Her cheeks glistened under the warm bedside lamp. Collier's heart stopped. He sat on the edge of her bed, whispering, "Rena, sweetheart, what's wrong?" She didn't speak at first. She only cried harder, trying to hide her face. When she finally lifted her head, her words stabbed straight through him. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you and Mommy fight. I didn't mean to break our family." Collier froze. "I'll be good. I promise. I'll clean my room. I'll do everything right. Please don't leave. Please don't stop loving me." Her voice cracked, and she clung to him like she was trying to hold the family together with her little hands. Collier's throat tightened to the point of pain. He hugged her tightly, feeling her sobs shake her tiny frame. "No, no, no," he whispered urgently. "Baby girl, you didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault. Mommy and Daddy made mistakes, not you. You hear me? Not you." But Maureen didn't believe him. She kept apologizing. She kept crying. She kept begging him not to leave. That night, Collier stayed beside her until she finally cried herself to sleep. When he stepped out into the hallway, Vanessa stood at the end of the corridor with her arms crossed. There wasn't guilt in her eyes, only exhaustion mixed with hardened anger. "How could you let her carry this?" Collier whispered. Vanessa answered sharply. "How could you?" Their marriage died right there, not from shouting, not from a dramatic scene, but from the realization that the person they once trusted most was now the one hurting them deepest. Yet neither of them hurt as much as the little girl sleeping with tear-stained cheeks believing she had broken her family. And that wound, that single moment, would shape everything that happened next. The Monday after Maureen's emotional breakdown, Collier walked into her school feeling something he hadn't felt in years: fear. Not fear of losing his company, not fear of losing investors, not fear of public embarrassment. This was deeper. This was the fear of a father realizing he might be losing his child piece by piece. The school hallway smelled faintly of crayons and disinfectant. Children's artwork lined the walls, splashes of color, smiling stick figures, animals wearing crowns. It should have been a cheerful place, but today, Collier walked through the halls like a man carrying a weight too heavy for one pair of shoulders. He paused outside the counselor's office, took a breath, and knocked. Inside were two people, the school counselor and the woman who would unknowingly alter the course of his life. Elise Knight stood to greet him with a gentle expression, her warmth filling the room instantly. She was a black woman with soft curls pulled into a loose bun and eyes that saw deeper than most people's words. She wore a simple blouse and cardigan, comfortable flats, and a delicate necklace that caught the light every time she moved. But it wasn't her appearance that struck Collier. It was the calm steadiness in her presence, like she had been built to carry children's pain without breaking. "Mr. Collier?" she said, extending her hand. "Yes, thank you for meeting with me." He shook her hand, noting how her grip was confident but kind. "Please, have a seat," she said. "I'm Elise. I teach Maureen's homeroom." Her voice was soothing, not soft, but grounded, clear. The kind of voice that could hush a classroom without ever raising in volume. They sat. The counselor began, but Elise took the lead because she had been there when Maureen cried. "First of all," Elise said gently, "Maureen is safe. And she's a wonderful child. She's bright, creative, and incredibly thoughtful." Collier swallowed hard. Hearing kind words about his daughter felt like someone pressing on a bruise he hadn't realized was there. "But," Elise continued carefully, "she's carrying emotional tension that's too heavy for her age. We've seen a shift, more worry, more sadness, more hesitation in her interactions." Collier's chest tightened. "What triggered yesterday's breakdown?" he asked. Elise exchanged a subtle look with the counselor. "We were reading a story during class," she said. "It involved a child whose parents lived in separate homes. Halfway through, Maureen began to cry uncontrollably. She told me she thought the fighting between you and her mother was her fault." Those words hit Collier like a blow. His jaw clenched. He looked away, blinking hard. Elise continued softly, she said, and I'm quoting her gently, "Maybe if I behaved better, Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be mad. Maybe they would be happy again." Collier closed his eyes. It was the very pain he heard in her room days earlier, the belief that she had broken something she never had the power to control. As the conversation continued, Elise's background naturally began to appear through her compassion. She mentioned her grandmother, Big Mama, as everyone in her family called her, who ran a community center in their neighborhood for decades. She spoke about growing up surrounded by cousins, aunts, uncles, and church families who took care of one another. Sunday dinners, choir rehearsals, backyard cookouts in the summer, where neighbors drifted in and out, as if the whole block was one large living room. Her upbringing taught her that children don't just belong to parents, they belong to the community. Emotional wounds don't get ignored. They get acknowledged and treated. And when someone hurts, you show up. You don't wait to be asked. Collier listened to her speak about this sense of community, a world filled with connection, vulnerability, and open support, and he felt something shift inside him. He had never lived like that. In his white suburban upbringing, emotions were kept behind closed doors. Problems were handled privately. No one asked for help. Everything stayed silent. That silence had now wrapped around his daughter like a cold blanket. Elise's world felt warmer, kinder, something Maureen desperately needed. As Elise spoke, Collier became painfully aware of how different his world was. His world demanded strength. Her world encouraged softness. His world valued appearance. Her world valued connection. His world pushed him to fix problems with money. Her world taught her that the best things in life weren't bought, they were lived. He thought back to his mansion's quiet halls, the unused dining table, the cold arguments behind closed doors. Then he imagined Elise's childhood home, filled with noise, laughter, music, and people who hugged without hesitation. Maureen had tasted both worlds, but right now, she needed the one that taught her she wasn't alone. Elise glanced at him with empathy that didn't feel invasive. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said softly, "but I want to help her, and you, if you'll allow me to." Collier nodded immediately. "Please, I'm grateful for anything." They went through practical steps. A journaling notebook so Maureen could draw her feelings. Afternoon check-ins during school. A possible meeting with a child therapist. More stability during transitions between homes. Encouraging open conversations with both parents. But Elise offered something else, something Collier didn't expect. She didn't treat him like a CEO. She didn't treat him like a failure. She didn't treat him like a man who couldn't fix his own family. She treated him like a father who cared. A father trying to learn how to do better. And that recognition, that rare, soft understanding, created a ripple in Collier's chest. For the first time in months, someone looked at him without anger or expectations. Elise simply wanted to help him protect his daughter. When Maureen entered the room at the end of the meeting, Elise gently placed a small sketchbook in her hands. "This is just for you," she told her. "Some kids draw what they feel, some write it. There's no right way, no wrong way. It's yours." Maureen looked up at her teacher like she wasn't used to an adult who understood silence. Elise knelt to her level. "You don't have to talk when it's hard," she said. "You can just draw. And if you ever want to show me or your daddy, you can." Maureen nodded slowly, clutching the notebook like a secret she had permission to guard. Collier saw the way she softened around Elise, the way her shoulders relaxed just a little. It reminded him of how she used to relax when she was younger. Before the shouting, the tension, the nights full of whispered fears, he realized that Elise wasn't just helping Maureen. She was opening a door Collier didn't know how to open himself. As they walked back to the car hand in hand, Maureen said something that broke him. "Daddy." Ms. Elise said, "Feelings don't make you bad." Her voice was small, hopeful. He swallowed hard. "She's right." Maureen looked down at the sketchbook. Then, up at him. "Does that mean I'm not the reason Mommy is mad all the time?" Collier's steps faltered. He knelt right there in the school parking lot and held her shoulders gently. "No, no, baby, you have never been the reason." Her eyes watered. "But she said," he cut her off, voice thick, "what Mommy and I are going through, that's between us. You didn't cause it, you didn't break anything. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Her tears fell again, but this time they weren't the hopeless kind. They were tears of relief, the kind that release a burden no child should ever carry. As he hugged her tight, Collier realized something terrifying. He had allowed silence, distance, and work to dig a hole so deep that his daughter nearly drowned in it. And Elise was the only one who had recognized the danger before he did. That thought struck him with gratitude and guilt. The guilt didn't consume him. It motivated him. For the first time since the divorce began, Collier promised himself that he would not let his work or pride blind him again. He would show up. He would listen. He would choose his daughter over every business call. He would rebuild trust, brick by brick, no matter how long it took. And somewhere in that moment, as he carried Maureen to the car, he found himself thinking about Elise, not as a teacher, not as a school staff member, but as the woman who had stepped into the darkest corner of his family's life and brought a little light with her. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of healing, the beginning of change, the beginning of something neither he nor Elise saw coming. A spark that started quietly, with compassion, a spark that would grow, a spark that Vanessa would later fear. The shift between Collier and Maureen didn't happen overnight, but the changes began to show in small, delicate ways, the kinds of ways most adults overlook but children feel deeply. Maureen started waking up with lighter steps. Her drawings had more color. She hugged Collier longer before letting go, and every day after school, she clutched that little sketchbook Elise had given her, as if it held her heart inside it. One Friday afternoon, when Collier picked her up, Maureen ran toward him, something she hadn't done in months. "Daddy, Miss Elise said I did amazing on my reading test." Her voice sparkled with pride, and Collier immediately scooped her up into a hug. "That's incredible, Rena. I'm proud of you." As they pulled apart, he noticed Elise standing by the classroom door, watching the reunion with a small smile. She gave Maureen a thumbs up before turning back to gather papers, but something about the way she moved stayed with Collier, a strange mix of gentleness and strength he couldn't shake. The next morning, Maureen padded into the kitchen wearing her unicorn pajamas, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. "Daddy," she said, pushing her curls out of her eyes, "Ms. Elise said baking helps kids feel better. Can we make cookies today?" Collier stared at her. The fact that she wanted him to bake with her made his throat tighten. He didn't cook. He'd never baked cookies in his life. But how could he say no? He knelt to her level. "Sweetheart, I don't really know how to make cookies." Maureen shrugged. "Miss Elise said you can learn anything if you try." That made him laugh softly. "Well, Miss Elise sounds very wise." "She is," Maureen said proudly. "She taught me how to braid my friend's hair. She said I could teach you how to bake." I drew steps in my sketchbook. She opened the notebook to a page with 4 drawings, a mixing bowl, a whisk, a tray, a big cookie with a smiley face. He couldn't resist. He lifted her into his arms with a grin. "Well then, Chef Maureen, I guess we're making cookies." The kitchen soon turned into a mess. Flour on the counters, flour on Maureen's face, flour on Collier's shirt. They read the instructions on the back of the chocolate chip bag, and Collier made exaggerated expressions as he pretended to be a professional baker. "This says, mix until smooth," he announced, holding the bowl. "So we must mix." Very seriously. Maureen giggled. "Daddy, that's not serious." He mixed with dramatic flair, sending batter in all directions. "Daddy." Her squeals filled the kitchen, bouncing off the walls like bright sunlight. It was laughter. Real laughter. The kind he hadn't heard from her since the marriage crumbled. They rolled dough into uneven balls, Maureen insisting each one needed exactly 7 chocolate chips for good luck. At one point, Collier got batter stuck on his nose, and Maureen burst into uncontrollable laughter. By the time the cookies were in the oven, something inside both of them had eased. A heaviness had lifted. For the first time in months, they weren't treading carefully around each other. They were simply father and daughter. While waiting for the cookies, Collier wiped her hands with a warm towel and sat her on the counter. "How are you feeling today? You look happier." She swung her legs lightly. "Miss Elise said, when you talk about your feelings, they don't stay heavy." He smiled. "She's right." Maureen looked down at her hands. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you mad at Mommy?" The question shook him for a moment. "I'm not mad," he said carefully. "But Mommy and I have things we need to fix. Adult things, not kid things." She nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "Miss Elise said, you and Mommy both love me, even if you don't love each other anymore." Collier's eyes softened. "She said that?" Maureen nodded. "She says some kids think love disappears when parents stop living together. But she said grown-ups' feelings are confusing, not gone." Collier gently brushed a curl away from her face and whispered, "Miss Elise sounds like someone who cares about you very much." "And you too, Daddy," Maureen added innocently. Collier didn't understand what she meant, not yet, but her words stayed with him. Over the next few weeks, small but meaningful shifts began to show in their home. When Maureen drew something in her sketchbook, she explained what each drawing meant. When she was upset, she used the breathing exercises Elise taught her. When Collier dropped her off at school, she ran to Elise for a morning hug and waved at him afterward with genuine smiles. Elise had become a safe place for Maureen at school, and without realizing it, Elise was slowly becoming a comforting presence in Collier's world too. One afternoon, when Collier picked Maureen up, Elise stepped aside to speak with him privately. "Mr. Collier, I just wanted to share something positive today," she said, smiling warmly. He raised his eyebrows. "Good news?" "Yes. Maureen has been expressing herself better in class. It's been beautiful watching her open up again." Collier felt relief bloom inside him. "That means a lot, truly." Elise nodded thoughtfully. "Children respond to consistency, Mr. Collier, and lately she's been more grounded. She feels your presence. She feels your effort." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the sincerity behind every word. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You've done more for her than you realize." Elise shook her head. "I'm just doing my part. A child's healing always starts at home." Her humility struck him more than anything. The cookies had become a weekend tradition. Every Saturday they tried a new recipe: oatmeal, peanut butter, cinnamon sugar. Collier burned most of them. Maureen ate them anyway. And each weekend, the kitchen filled with more laughter. One Saturday afternoon, as Collier carried a tray of cookies into the school for a parent-child event, Elise passed him in the hallway and stopped in her tracks. "Oh, wow," she said, smiling as she lifted one brow. "You baked?" "Attempted," he replied, holding up the tray with a grin. "Maureen says they're good, but she's biased." Elise laughed softly, a sound so warm it made him pause. "Well, they smell wonderful," she said. "You're making memories she'll never forget." Her words sank deeper than she realized. Elise turned to walk away, and Collier found himself watching her. The confidence in her steps, the kindness she carried effortlessly, the subtle glow that seemed to follow her wherever she went. For a moment, he wondered what her world was like outside of school, what her weekends looked like, who she talked to when she needed comfort, who listened when she had heavy days. He shook the thought off quickly, or tried to. But some things aren't easy to shake, not when they touch the right part of the heart. Vanessa had always kept tabs on anything involving Maureen. She wanted control, even after the divorce papers were signed. When Maureen began talking about Elise more often, Vanessa's tone changed. "Who is this Elise woman?" she demanded one evening when she called Maureen on Collier's phone. "Daddy's friend?" Maureen said innocently. Collier quickly corrected her. "Her teacher, Vanessa. Her teacher. And why is she so involved?" Vanessa asked sharply, her voice dripping with accusation. "She's helping Maureen communicate better. That's all." Vanessa scoffed. "I find it interesting that she's helping with something you should have handled years ago." Collier clenched his jaw but said nothing. He wouldn't fight in front of Maureen. But Vanessa wasn't done. "Tell me, Collier," she said coldly. "Are you sure this woman isn't stepping into roles she shouldn't?" Something shifted in her voice, something dark, something territorial. And that was the moment the jealousy began. Not because Elise had done anything wrong, not because she crossed any boundaries, but because Maureen was healing. And Vanessa couldn't control that. Later that night, after putting Maureen to bed, Collier stood in the doorway and watched her sleep. She looked peaceful, a peace he thought they had lost forever. He walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and paused. He realized he had smiled more in the past 2 weeks than he had in the past 2 years. He realized Maureen's laughter had become the soundtrack of their weekends. He realized he had begun to look forward to school pickups, not just to see his daughter, but because Elise would be there. He realized something was growing, not romance, not yet. Just a spark, a quiet one, a respectful one, a spark built on gratitude, understanding, and tenderness. But sparks have a way of spreading. Collier didn't know it yet, but that spark would ignite emotions he thought had died within him. And eventually it would lead to the moment in the grocery store parking lot, the moment that shattered everything again. But for now, the spark rested quietly, waiting, growing, changing everything beneath the surface. The morning after Maureen's breakthrough with the cookies, Collier sat alone at the kitchen table long after she had gone to bed. The oven light was still on, illuminating the last few cookies on the tray. He stared at them the way a man stares at a reminder of everything he'd almost lost. He had spent so many years convincing himself that success meant pushing forward at full speed, ignoring fatigue, ignoring personal needs, and ignoring the gentle nudges that warned him his family needed him more than his career did. But now, with Maureen's laughter echoing faintly in his memory, he realized something. No meeting, no partnership, no investor, no contract could replace the feeling he experienced that day with his daughter. Something had shifted inside him, a type of awakening he'd never felt before. And for once in his life, he didn't try to ignore it. He would not go back to the man he was before. He couldn't, not when he'd finally seen what consistent presence could do for his daughter. On Monday morning, Collier walked into his office with a type of clarity he hadn't felt in years. His assistant greeted him with a list of scheduled calls, upcoming investor meetings, and quarterly review deadlines. But Collier held up a hand. "I'm stepping away for a while," he said calmly. She blinked. While? How long, sir?" He exhaled slowly. "Long enough to fix what's actually important in my life. But the board? I'll speak with them myself." His assistant hesitated, but one look at his expression told her he wasn't wavering. Collier closed his office door and dialed into the board meeting. He could practically feel the reactions through the speaker as he announced his temporary leave: shock, concern, questions about potential losses, reminders of his responsibilities. But for the first time, he didn't feel pulled by their expectations. For once, his priorities were clear. By the end of the call, he had delegated tasks, arranged emergency coverage, and set boundaries he should have established years ago. As he packed his laptop bag, he felt a strange sense of relief. His world had always revolved around that office, its demands, its stress, its noise. Walking out felt like stepping out from under a shadow he didn't realize was suffocating him. When he drove to pick up Maureen from school that afternoon, he wasn't rushing. He wasn't checking his watch. He wasn't thinking about emails. He was present. Fully, intentionally present. The changes were immediate. Instead of hustling through school parking lots, he arrived early. Instead of quick dinners eaten separately, he started cooking simple meals: pancakes, grilled cheese, scrambled eggs with toast, even if most turned out unevenly. Maureen didn't care. She loved every attempt. They created new routines: evening walks, coloring sessions, bedtime stories, quiet talks before bed when she opened up in ways she never did before. One night, Maureen climbed onto his lap as they sat on the couch watching cartoons. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you home more now?" He nodded, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm here." She rested her head on his chest. "I like it better this way." Those 5 words were enough to erase years of guilt and regret. For the first time since the divorce began, Maureen felt safe. And Collier felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. At school, Elise saw the changes almost immediately. Maureen walked with more energy. Her posture brightened. She spoke more in class. She laughed with her classmates. She even volunteered to read aloud during story time, something she had never done before. One afternoon, Elise caught Collier at dismissal time. Maureen ran ahead to play on the swings, leaving the adults a moment to talk. "I've noticed a big difference," Elise said, her voice warm. "She's opening up more. She's participating in class. She's smiling without hesitation." Collier let out a slow breath. "I've made some changes." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Good changes, I hope." "Yes," he said with a small smile. "Long overdue ones." The sincerity in her eyes made it impossible to hide the truth. "I took leave from work," he added. Elise's features softened in surprise. "That's a major step." He nodded. "I didn't realize how much she needed me until I saw how lost she felt. I won't let that happen again." Elise crossed her arms lightly, her cardigan sleeves shifting as she leaned against the hallway wall. "You're doing something important," she said. "Showing up consistently is one of the strongest forms of love a parent can give." Her words struck him more deeply than she knew. Her presence had a way of grounding him, not through pressure, not through judgment, but through quiet encouragement. As Collier became more involved in Maureen's day-to-day life, he also became more exposed to the cultural dynamics Elise grew up with, and it opened his eyes to aspects of nurturance he had never experienced. One afternoon he arrived early to pick up Maureen, and found Elise outside leading a small group of students in a hand-clapping rhythm game rooted in Black childhood traditions. The children chanted a rhyme while clapping in sync, laughing whenever someone missed the beat. Elise was right in the middle of them, clapping and laughing just as hard. It was a scene full of life, connection, and unrestrained joy. A type of joy Collier had rarely seen in his own childhood, where emotions were kept neat, tidy, and quiet. When the children ran off to the playground, Elise approached him with a smile. "You look surprised," she teased lightly. "I've just never seen a teacher do that before." She laughed. "Where I come from, involvement is everything. Community, movement, laughter. It's how kids express themselves. It's how we make them feel seen." He nodded thoughtfully. "I grew up differently. Emotions were contained." Elise tilted her head. "And how did that work for you?" He chuckled softly. "Not well." She smiled, a warm, knowing smile, one that acknowledged their different worlds without making either feel superior. He watched her interact with other parents, Black parents, white parents, immigrant families, grandparents raising their grandkids, and saw the ease with which she navigated it all. She wasn't performing. She wasn't adjusting herself to fit different people. She simply carried herself with kindness, and people responded. For Collier, it was eye-opening. For Maureen, it was healing. The more time he spent adjusting to his new role, the more he realized something meaningful. He wasn't just changing his schedule. He was changing his identity. He was becoming the father he had always wanted to be, but never made time for. And Elise played a part in that transformation, not by force, not by asking, but by showing him what presence looked like through her interactions with Maureen and everyone around her. One day while watching Maureen tie her shoes, something she used to struggle with but now did confidently, Elise approached him with a gentle look. "She's learning to trust herself again," Elise said. "Children do that when things feel stable." Collier's gaze softened. "Thank you for being part of that." Elise shook her head. "You're the parent, Collier. I'm just helping her find the words she was afraid to speak." But something in her tone told him she understood more than she was saying. And something inside him warmed, a spark he hadn't expected, hadn't asked for, but felt deeply. It wasn't romantic yet. It wasn't even conscious, but it was the beginning of something tender, something built on empathy, something steady and slow, something Vanessa would not understand, something Vanessa would not allow. And as Collier walked Maureen to the car that afternoon, her hand in one hand, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, he realized his life was already changing, piece by piece. The man he had been before, exhausted, absent, emotionally disconnected, was disappearing. And a new version of himself was emerging. A version capable of love, stability, and presence. A version Elise saw clearly, long before he dared to see it himself. The first real conflict between Vanessa and Elise didn't happen inside a courtroom or during a heated phone call. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day you'd never expect to change anything. The sky was overcast, children spilled out of classrooms in noisy clusters, and teachers guided students toward their buses with practiced patience. Collier had arrived early, as he'd been doing since taking leave from work. He parked his car, grabbed Maureen's favorite apple juice from the cup holder, and leaned against the hood while waiting for her class to be dismissed. He noticed Elise through the windows, laughing with a student who handed her a crayon drawing. Her smile was steady, gentle, a smile that never tried to be perfect. It simply was. When Maureen spotted him, she ran out with her backpack bouncing behind her. "Daddy," she said, jumping into his arms. He lifted her easily. "How was today?" "I read 2 pages without help," she said proudly. Miss Elise clapped for me. Collier grinned. "That's my girl." It was supposed to be a normal pickup. No tension, no issues, no surprises. But Vanessa's car screeched into the parking lot 20 minutes late. She always arrived like a storm when she was upset, abrupt, loud, and unpredictable. Today was no different. Vanessa stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses, heels clicking aggressively against the pavement, her hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that emphasized the sharp tension in her jaw. She scanned the school grounds with irritated urgency before her eyes locked onto Collier. And then onto Elise, who had stepped outside with a clipboard. The moment Vanessa saw them, standing within the same vicinity, her expression shifted. anger, suspicion, possessiveness, fear, all layered at once. Vanessa marched toward them with stiff shoulders. "Maureen," she said sharply, "get your backpack. We're leaving." Maureen stiffened in Collier's arms. He could feel her body tense, the joy draining out of her face. "You're here early," Collier said, keeping his tone calm. "We weren't expecting you today." Vanessa removed her sunglasses, her eyes narrowed. "I said I'd take her today. You weren't answering your phone." "My phone wasn't ringing," he said plainly. "You might have called the old number again." Vanessa ignored the explanation and pointed at Maureen. "Give her to me." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was loaded, the kind that made Maureen shrink backward, tightening her arms around her father's neck. Elise noticed the change instantly. She approached slowly, her posture protective but respectful. "Is everything all right?" Elise asked, addressing both of them. Vanessa turned on her sharply. "Who are you talking to? Because it better not be me." Elise remained calm. "I'm making sure Maureen is okay." "She's fine," Vanessa snapped. "She doesn't need you watching her." Collier stepped in. "Vanessa, keep your voice down. This is her teacher." "I know exactly who she is," Vanessa snapped. "The woman who seems a little too involved in things that don't concern her." Elise said nothing. She didn't defend herself. She simply held Maureen's gaze, giving the child silent reassurance. But Vanessa wasn't finished. "Maureen, come here." The little girl shook her head. "I want to stay with Daddy." That did it. Vanessa's jaw tightened in a way that made Collier instantly alert. Collier tried to de-escalate. "Vanessa, let's talk calmly. She had a great day. Let's not ruin it." "You think I'm ruining it?" Vanessa whispered with a dangerous edge. "I'm her mother. I don't need permission to pick up my own child." A few parents nearby glanced over. Elise discreetly led them a few steps away from the crowd to give them privacy. Vanessa folded her arms. "She should have been waiting for me." "Why wasn't she waiting?" she demanded. Collier exhaled. "Because you were late." "And she didn't know. I said we agreed." "We didn't agree. You left a voicemail on the wrong number again." Vanessa's eyes flicked to Elise. "And why is she here, standing with my daughter, acting like a stepmother?" Elise inhaled quietly but kept her composure. "I stepped over because Maureen appeared frightened. That's my responsibility." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Your responsibility ends at that classroom door." There was a moment of silence, heavy, tense, dangerous. Elise didn't argue. She didn't step back. But she didn't step forward either. She simply stood where she was, steady like a lighthouse during a storm. Collier gently set Maureen down but kept a hand on her back. "Vanessa," he said softly, "you're upset, but please don't take it out on her." That was when the sky opened a little, raindrops beginning to fall in slow, steady taps. A light drizzle. Collier reached into his car for an umbrella. Elise instinctively opened hers at the same moment. Vanessa watched the two umbrellas open simultaneously and froze. To her, it didn't look like a simple moment. It looked like alliance, togetherness, closeness, things she could no longer claim. The rain fell harder. Elise motioned Maureen under her umbrella. "You're getting wet, sweetheart," she said softly. Maureen slipped under without hesitation. Vanessa stared, stunned, offended, and shaking with quiet rage. "You see?" she whispered sharply to Collier. "She acts like she's her mother." Collier shook his head. "Stop twisting things. Elise is just being kind." "Kind?" Vanessa scoffed. "Oh, that's what we're calling it?" A gust of wind blew, shifting rain into their direction. Automatically, Elise shifted her umbrella, so it covered Maureen and Collier both. It wasn't intentional. It was instinct. The instinct of someone who cared about children deeply, someone who wanted to protect. But to Vanessa, it was betrayal. "You two look ridiculous," she snapped. "Standing there under matching umbrellas like you're the ones raising her." Collier stayed calm. "Vanessa, come on." "No," she said with a trembling voice. "Maureen, get over here now." Maureen's lower lip quivered. She didn't move. Elise knelt to her level. "You don't have to choose," Elise whispered. "You're okay." Her voice was steady enough to calm the child, but soft enough not to ignite Vanessa further. Maureen's small fingers clutched Elise's cardigan. Vanessa saw it. and something inside her cracked. When the rain intensified, Collier edged closer to Elise so their umbrellas overlapped fully, creating a larger space for Maureen between them. Their shoulders brushed. Barely. But it mattered. Because in that tiny brush of fabric, something shifted. Collier glanced at Elise. Elise kept her eyes on Maureen, and in that small moment, something fragile but powerful formed in the invisible space between them. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't intentional. It was simply two adults holding a child between them, trying to protect her from a storm, both literal and emotional. But to Vanessa, watching from a few feet away, it looked like something else entirely. Something threatening. Something that made her feel replaced. The drizzle slowed after a few minutes. The clouds lightened. Parents began heading to their cars. Vanessa grabbed Maureen's bag. "We're leaving," she said. "Now." But Maureen didn't budge. Elise stepped back quietly, giving space. Collier crouched beside his daughter. "Sweetheart, Mommy's here now. It's okay," Maureen whispered. "Can we do cookies later?" "Of course." Vanessa tightened her jaw. "Cookies? Again? Is that what you two do now?" "What does that matter?" Collier asked tiredly. "It matters because she's turning against me," Vanessa said. "And I know exactly why." She shot a glare at Elise. Elise stood still, hands folded calmly. "I'm not taking your place," she said softly. "I wouldn't do that." Vanessa's voice cracked. "You already are." Before Collier could respond, Elise spoke quietly. "Maureen, remember what we talked about in class? You can love many people. You don't have to choose." Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. "You think you have the right to teach her that?" She snapped. Elise didn't flinch. "I teach every child that." And then, just as the air grew thick with tension, a bright, cheerful group of students ran out waving colorful flyers. "Miss Elise, the Spring Festival, we're handing out flyers." They shoved one into her hands. The flyer had drawings of music notes, outdoor games, food stands, and dance circles. Elise smiled and turned to Maureen. "The festival is next Saturday," she said gently. "Lots of food, music, games. You and your dad are welcome to come." Vanessa went still. Every muscle in her body tightened. She knew what festivals like these represented: community, warmth, connection, belonging. These were the kinds of places where Elise thrived, and places where she feared Collier might begin to see a world he had never known, a world he could easily fall in love with. Collier accepted the flyer. "We'll be there," he said softly. Vanessa's pupils narrowed. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was fear. Fear that Collier and Maureen were slipping into a world where Vanessa had no control. A world Elise understood deeply. A world Vanessa felt threatened by. And for the first time, Elise looked up, accidentally meeting Vanessa's eyes. Both women understood something wordless. Whatever this connection was between Collier, Elise, and Maureen, it was growing. And Vanessa felt it, and she would not let it continue without a fight. The spring festival arrived faster than Collier expected. The week leading up to it felt lighter, filled with small moments that reminded him of what family used to feel like. Simple breakfasts, school drop-offs without tension, and evenings where Maureen giggled more than she frowned. It was a rhythm he had missed. A rhythm Elise unknowingly helped restore. Saturday morning, Collier woke earlier than usual. The sun had barely risen, casting a warm, gentle hue across the living room. He could hear soft footsteps approaching before a small voice broke the quiet. "Daddy, are you up?" He smiled. "I am." "Someone's excited." Maureen nodded vigorously, curl-covered head bouncing. "Miss Elise said there's music and games and food and a big dance circle. She said I should wear comfy shoes." Collier chuckled. "Then we'll make sure you're ready." They picked out her outfit, a light printed dress, little white sneakers, and a jacket. She insisted on tying around her waist because Miss Elise said festivals get warm. Collier found himself smiling again. His daughter adored Elise, and honestly, he didn't blame her. As they walked out to the car, he couldn't help feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Festivals weren't his comfort zone. He'd grown up attending quiet summer picnics in white suburban parks, where families gathered around simple barbecues and children played without much noise. Elise's world was different. He had seen glimpses of it, vibrant, communal, full of music and life. Today, He would experience it fully. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered what it would mean for him. And what Vanessa would do when she found out. The festival was held at a large community park surrounded by tall trees. The moment they walked in, Collier felt the difference. The air vibrated with life. Upbeat music flowed from speakers set near the main field. Children ran across the grass with painted cheeks, and families gathered around food tents where neighbors greeted each other like longtime friends. Colorful banners swayed in the breeze. Smoke from grilled food drifted across the field. Laughter rang from every corner. This wasn't a polished, curated charity event. This was a celebration, real, raw, warm. A gathering of people who came together because they wanted to, not because of appearances. Maureen's face lit up instantly. "Daddy! Look! Face painting!" Collier followed her pointing finger and saw Elise near a booth, helping a group of kids wash their hands after messy paint activities. She wore jeans, a simple top, and her hair in natural curls that framed her face beautifully. Her expression was relaxed, the way someone looks when they're home. Maureen ran toward her. "Miss Elise." Elise turned, eyes brightening when she saw her. "Rena, you made it." When Elise looked up at Collier, something soft passed between them. Recognition, maybe gratitude, maybe something deeper. But neither of them said it out loud. "You dressed perfectly," Elise said to Maureen, crouching to eye level. "Ready to explore?" Maureen nodded. "Yes," Daddy said, "we can stay long." Elise glanced at Collier appreciatively. "That's great. There's a lot to do." He nodded, trying not to reveal how out of place he felt. "We're open to suggestions. Start with the food." Elise smiled. "You can't enjoy a festival on an empty stomach. Come on." And just like that, the three of them ventured into Elise's world. A world filled with rhythm, laughter, and a type of connection Collier had never experienced. They approached the food tents first. A woman behind the grill flipped chicken wings with practiced ease while greeting Elise with a warm smile. "Look who finally showed up," the woman teased. "We saved you a plate." Elise laughed. "I knew you would. And Miss Maureen here needs to try the macaroni. It's life-changing." Maureen giggled shyly. The woman noticed the child hiding behind Elise's legs and leaned forward gently. "You must be Rena. Elise talks about how kind you are." Maureen's eyes widened. She does?" "All the time," the woman said warmly. "Says you're smart, helpful, and very brave." Maureen straightened with pride. Collier noticed. Elise noticed too. These interactions were simple, but they mattered. They moved from booth to booth, trying fried fish, warm cornbread, grilled vegetables, fruit cups sprinkled with cinnamon, and fresh lemonade that made Maureen smile so hard her cheeks hurt. Everywhere Elise went, someone greeted her, from older neighbors to former students to parents who hugged her tightly, expressing gratitude for something she had done for their children. Elise didn't do anything dramatic. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Collier watched quietly, struck by how deeply rooted she was in this community. It wasn't an audience she performed for. It was a family she belonged to. In his world, gatherings were quiet, polite, reserved. Here, everything was expressive, colorful, alive. And he found himself drawn into it in a way he didn't expect. After they finished eating, Elise led them toward a shaded area where several older women sat on picnic blankets gossiping, laughing, and organizing small activities. One of the women, gray hair tucked under a colorful scarf, called out, "Elise baby, bring that child over here. Let me see her." Elise smiled. "This is Miss Wanda. She's practically everyone's auntie." Miss Wanda waved Maureen over. "Well now, aren't you just the prettiest little thing?" she said, cupping the child's cheeks. "Let me put a little sparkle on you." She dabbed Maureen's cheek with safe glitter gel. "There. Festival ready." Maureen beamed. Collier watched, overwhelmed by a mixture of tenderness and longing. He had never grown up with this. Older women who acted as neighborhood grandmothers, community elders who cared for children as their own. Elise caught the look in his eyes. She didn't comment. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence speaks louder than questions. Later, Elise took Maureen to the arts corner where children were painting wooden shapes and glittering cardboard crowns. Collier stood back, watching father and daughter moments unfold naturally. But Elise kept glancing at him, not in the way someone seeks attention, but but as someone checking to make sure he felt included. At one point, she brushed a streak of paint off Maureen's cheek and accidentally got a smear on her own face. Collier laughed softly. "You have a little something, just there." She wiped her cheek, missing entirely. He stepped closer. Closer than he needed to. Closer than he intended. He reached up gently, wiping the paint with his thumb. Elise froze. Maureen looked between them with innocent amusement. Elise cleared her throat, stepping back slightly, but not breaking eye contact. "Thank you," she said softly. "Of course," Collier replied. A moment passed, charged, quiet, meaningful. It was the type of moment that begins without anyone naming it, but both feel it. As the afternoon progressed, festival music grew louder, and people formed a dance circle in the center of the field. A drummer set the rhythm, children followed, and soon adults joined in with laughter. Maureen tugged on Collier's sleeve. "Daddy, can we dance?" He hesitated. I'm not sure I know how." "Come on," Elise laughed gently, taking Maureen's hand. "We'll teach you." The three of them entered the circle. Collier awkward at first, Elise effortlessly rhythmic, Maureen giggling non-stop. Elise guided Maureen into simple steps, clapping along, encouraging her gently. Collier watched them, heart full in a way he hadn't expected. The two most important girls in his life spinning in front of him, one who healed him quietly, and the other who needed him more than he ever realized. At one point, Maureen grabbed both of their hands. "Daddy, look, we're a real family." Elise froze. Collier froze. Time froze. Maureen didn't understand the weight of her words. But the adults did. Elise knelt quickly, smoothing the child's hair. "You have a family already, sweetheart," she said softly. "One that loves you very much." "I know," Maureen said. "But this feels happy." Collier swallowed hard. Elise didn't look at him, but he felt the tension between them tighten. And in that moment, the spark they had been ignoring grew stronger. Gentle, warm, but undeniable. Across the field, hidden behind a group of parents, Vanessa stood completely still. She had come only to check if Collier was there, nothing more. But when she saw him holding Maureen's hand, laughing, moving with Elise like they had built a life together, something inside her erupted. She pulled out her phone, clicked quick photos, then more, zooming in, capturing every moment. Collier smiling in Elise's direction, Elise lifting Maureen in her arms, Maureen holding both their hands. Every shot looked like a family portrait, a new family portrait. Vanessa's breathing grew uneven. "This is what they've been doing?" she whispered. Anger tightened her chest, jealousy clouded her judgment, fear hardened her heartbeat. She watched them dance again, watched them laugh, watched them breathe the same air as if they belonged together. And in that moment, that exact moment, Vanessa made a silent decision. If she couldn't control the narrative, she would control the consequences. As Collier lifted Maureen for one last spin, Vanessa lowered her phone. Her hand trembled. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes filled with something far more potent than jealousy, something that would soon unleash chaos neither Elise nor Collier saw coming. Because Vanessa didn't want Elise gone. She wanted Elise blamed. She wanted Collier punished. She wanted Maureen confused again, pulled back into the emotional tug-of-war she believed she needed to win. And as Collier walked toward Elise, unaware of the storm building behind them, Vanessa whispered to herself, "I'll fix this." But what she had in mind wasn't fixing. It was destruction, the kind that would change everything. The Monday after the festival, Collier woke up feeling something he hadn't felt in years, calm. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Maureen woke up humming the song she danced to in the circle. She sat at the dining table, swinging her legs happily, and drew pictures of the festival in her sketchbook. Her favorite drawing was of herself holding both Collier and Elise's hands under the bright festival banners. Life felt hopeful. But hope has enemies, and Vanessa had spent the entire night plotting. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. She had stared at the photos she took at the festival until her eyes burned. Photos of Collier smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years. Photos of Elise guiding Maureen like a second mother. Photos of Maureen glowing with joy. Vanessa wasn't thinking logically. She was thinking emotionally, dangerously emotionally. She told herself that Collier was trying to replace her, that Elise was manipulating Maureen, that she needed to protect her child from outsiders. The more she let those thoughts grow, the more distorted her interpretation became. By sunrise, she had made her decision. She was going to strike first. Collier dropped Maureen off at school with a kiss on her forehead and a warm goodbye. He headed to a local cafe to work on personal notes. For once, there was no stress gnawing at him. But 90 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a message from his attorney. Urgent. We need to talk. Now. Collier's stomach dropped. He dialed immediately. His attorney answered in a rushed voice. Collier, Vanessa filed an emergency motion this morning. Collier's heart raced. For what? She's making serious claims. Extremely serious. What kind of claims? The attorney sighed heavily. She's accusing you of endangering Maureen by involving her with someone she describes as a non-relative interfering in parental decisions. She says Elise is stepping into a parental role and harming Maureen emotionally. Collier nearly dropped the phone. That's insane. Elise saved Maureen. She helped her heal. She's also claiming you're neglecting co-parenting responsibilities and allowing an unknowledged third party to manipulate your child. Collier squeezed his eyes shut. This is a lie, he whispered. His attorney continued carefully. The court scheduled an emergency hearing this afternoon. His whole world tilted. A hearing today? A hearing based on lies? He rubbed his forehead. This is retaliation. She saw us at the festival. And she's weaponizing it, the attorney replied. We must prepare. Collier felt the familiar heaviness of fear return, heavier than before because now Elise was involved. 2 hours later, they sat in a small courtroom. Cold, quiet, tense. Vanessa sat across the aisle with her attorney, her expression composed, but her eyes full of a cold fire. She looked at Elise like she was the enemy. She looked at Collier like he had betrayed her. Elise sat beside Collier, hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't speak. She barely breathed. She had never been inside a courtroom like this, one charged with unspoken anger and years of broken trust. The judge read the motion silently before looking up. Ms. Vanessa, you are alleging emotional interference, boundary violations, and unsafe involvement by a teacher? Vanessa nodded with forced calm. Yes, Your Honor. This woman, she pointed at Elise, has been inserting herself into areas that should be handled by parents. She's influencing my child and causing emotional confusion. Elise's eyes widened, stunned by the accusation. Vanessa continued, voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. My daughter is becoming overly attached to someone who has no legal or familial connection to her. It's harming her relationship with me as her mother. Collier clenched his fists. That is not true, he said firmly. Maureen is improving. She's communicating better. She's happier. Vanessa snapped. Because she thinks Elise is replacing me. Elise inhaled sharply. I would never. The judge held up a hand. Everyone will speak one at a time. Vanessa's attorney added fuel. Your Honor, we believe Ms. Elise has overstepped her professional boundaries. There is concern she may be influencing the child's preference toward the father. Elise felt sick. I haven't done anything inappropriate, she whispered to Collier. I know, he whispered back. Elise had spent her life protecting children, not harming them. She had spent years building her credibility in education. Her reputation meant everything. Not because of ego, but because helping children was her calling. Now, she sat in a courtroom being painted as a threat. Her chest tightened painfully. What if the school heard about this? What if she lost her job? What if parents saw her differently? The fear was suffocating. The judge turned to her. Miss Elise, would you like to respond? Elise stood slowly. I care about Maureen, she said softly. I care about all my students. My role is to support their emotional and academic needs. Everything I've done has been for her well-being. I've never tried to take her mother's place. Her voice shook, but her honesty filled the room. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. Of course she'd say that. Elise's hands trembled as she returned to her seat. The judge steepled his hands. I want clarity, Ms. Vanessa. Aside from your interpretation of events, do you have evidence that Ms. Elise acted outside her professional role? Vanessa handed photos to the bailiff, the ones she took at the festival. In each image, Collier, Elise, and Maureen were smiling, dancing, eating. Images of joy. Images of healing. But in Vanessa's hands, they were turned into evidence. "Look at them," Vanessa said sharply. "They act like a family." "That is not appropriate." The judge examined the photos. "These look like community event pictures," he said flatly. Vanessa leaned forward with cold determination. No teacher should be that involved with a student outside of school. Collier stood abruptly. "What do you want, Vanessa? For Maureen to stay miserable? For her to never trust anyone again? Elise has been helping our daughter pull herself out of emotional pain. And you're punishing her for it?" The room fell silent. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "She is my daughter, Collier, not Elise's." The judge leaned forward, expression shifting from neutral to stern. "Ms. Vanessa." Vanessa looked up. "Your motion is not only unsupported by evidence," the judge said sharply, "but it suggests you may be projecting your personal frustrations onto this situation." She blinked. "What?" "You claim emotional manipulation, but the photos show nothing harmful. You accuse Miss Elise of boundary violations, yet nothing in the testimony proves inappropriate conduct." Vanessa's attorney shifted uneasily. "And your statements," the judge continued, "imply resentment toward the father rather than concern for the child." Vanessa's face flushed. The judge's tone hardened. "I will not allow this court to be used as a battleground for personal jealousy." A gasp rippled from a few observers. "You filed an emergency motion based on assumptions and personal interpretation, not facts." Vanessa looked stunned, almost dizzy. The judge finalized, motion denied. Relief washed over Collier and Elise, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of something darker. Vanessa stared at the floor, hands shaking, breathing shallow. Her anger wasn't extinguished. It was contained, compressed, made heavier. Collier exhaled. "We're done here," the judge said firmly. "Go home and focus on your child, not on tearing down the people helping her." As they exited the courtroom, Vanessa called out sharply, "This isn't over, Collier." Her voice echoed through the hallway. Elise stiffened. Collier didn't turn around. He kept walking, Maureen's name on his mind, not Vanessa's threats. Outside the courthouse, Collier took a seat on a bench, rubbing his forehead. Elise sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly. "I'm so sorry you were dragged into this," Collier murmured. "You didn't drag me," Elise said softly. "She did." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw how shaken she was. "This could affect your job," he said quietly. Elise nodded. "I know. Do you want me to talk to the principal? Explain?" She shook her head. "No. The less attention brought to this, the better. It will fade if we handle it carefully." There was pain in her eyes, not because she feared Vanessa, but because she feared for her career and for Maureen's peace. Collier hated it. He hated that someone as kind as Elise had to pay the price for his past choices. "I think," Elise began slowly, choosing her words carefully, "it might be best if we keep some distance, at least publicly, until things calm down." Collier felt a sting in his chest. Not because she was wrong, but because the space between them had started to feel meaningful. "You're right," he said reluctantly. "I don't want her dragging you into another mess." Elise nodded, looking down. "It's not forever, just enough time to protect Maureen." Collier swallowed. "And to protect you." Their eyes met, filled with unspoken emotion, respect, longing, and fear. They both stood. They walked away from each other slowly, painfully, knowing this wasn't the end, but knowing something important had changed. Vanessa had struck, and though she failed in court, the damage she inflicted would echo far beyond that cold courtroom. Because fear had entered Elise's heart, and fear had entered Collier's, and Maureen was in the middle of it all. The days following the court hearing were heavy in ways none of them expected. Elise kept her distance, just as she promised, limiting her interactions with Collier to brief nods and short updates about Maureen's schoolwork. She didn't linger at dismissal time. She didn't kneel beside Maureen for long conversations. She didn't stand too close to Collier. It hurt her to create that distance, because she cared. It hurt Collier too, because the space felt like losing something precious. But it hurt Maureen the most. She didn't understand why her favorite teacher no longer walked her to the car, Why Elise no longer knelt to hug her before she left. Why Elise's eyes looked sad whenever she waved from the door. "Daddy," Maureen whispered one evening as he tucked her into bed. "Did I do something wrong? Why is Miss Elise acting different?" Her question stung deeper than Vanessa's accusations ever could. "No, sweetheart," Collier whispered, brushing a curl from her forehead. "You didn't do anything wrong. I promise." Maureen's small fingers gripped his wrist. "Then why does it feel like I messed something up again?" Those words took the air right out of his chest. He pulled her into his arms. "No," he murmured softly, "you didn't ruin anything. Grown-ups made decisions that are confusing, but none of it is your fault. Not then. Not now." But she didn't fully believe him, and that quiet doubt seeded itself deep inside her. What none of them realized was that while Elise and Collier were trying to protect Maureen from conflict, Vanessa was drowning in it, not metaphorically, not lightly. She was truly spiraling inside a storm she couldn't navigate. The courtroom humiliation replayed in Vanessa's mind every night. The judge's critical tone, the disapproval on the faces around her, the way Elise had stood so calmly, even in fear, the way Collier defended Elise more firmly than he had ever defended their marriage. Each memory dug deeper wounds. She felt betrayed. She felt replaced. She felt irrelevant in her own daughter's life. And instead of seeking help, Vanessa isolated herself. She cried in her car. She threw her makeup bag against the wall. She paced around her apartment, with her phone in hand, scrolling through the festival photos she secretly took, over and over again. Every smile on Collier's face felt like an offense. Every moment Elise touched Maureen's shoulder felt like an attack. Every sound of her daughter's laughter that didn't involve her felt like proof she was losing. By the end of the week, Vanessa had convinced herself of one thing. She was being pushed out. And that meant she needed to fight harder, not with logic, not with love, but with desperation. On Friday, Vanessa arrived at Collier's house to pick up Maureen for the weekend. She expected her daughter to run into her arms, to ease some of the insecurity crushing her chest. Instead, Maureen appeared at the top of the stairs and froze. Her backpack hung crooked over her small shoulder. Her curls were still slightly damp from her after-school shower. And her eyes carried a hesitation Vanessa wasn't prepared for. "Come on," Vanessa said, forcing cheerfulness. "Mommy's here." But Maureen didn't run. She came slowly, too slowly. And when she reached the bottom step, she didn't hug Vanessa. Instead, she whispered, "Daddy, can you come too?" The words sent shockwaves through the room. Collier blinked. "Sweetheart, you're going with Mommy tonight, but I want to stay with you," Maureen said, voice trembling. "I feel safe here." Vanessa's entire body stiffened. Her lips parted in disbelief. "Safe?" she repeated, her voice soft but deadly. "You don't feel safe with me?" Maureen's eyes widened. "No, Mommy, that's not what I meant." "Yes, it is," Vanessa snapped. "It's exactly what you meant." Collier stepped between them. "Vanessa, stop. She's overwhelmed." Vanessa glared at him. "Oh, I'm sure you love this," she hissed. "Her choosing you. Her rejecting me. No one is choosing anything," Collier said calmly. "Yes, they are," Vanessa said sharply. "You caused this. You put her in the middle. You let that woman get into her head." "That woman?" Collier repeated, his voice icy. "Yes," Vanessa spat. "Elise." The air went thick. Maureen covered her ears. "Stop, please, stop." But Vanessa couldn't. Her pain had grown too large. "I'm her mother," Vanessa shouted. "Not Elise, not you, not this new life you're creating behind my back." Collier lowered his voice, trying to defuse the situation. "Vanessa, you're scaring her." Those words broke her. Tears filled her eyes as she grabbed Maureen's hand, too tightly. "We're leaving," she choked out. "Vanessa," Collier tried. "We're leaving," she screamed. Maureen cried harder. "Daddy." But Vanessa didn't let go. Not physically, not emotionally, not mentally. She dragged her daughter outside, tears blurring her vision, heart pounding, mind unraveling faster than she could control. Collier watched from the doorway, frozen in fear. He knew something in Vanessa was breaking. He didn't know how badly. Not yet. 2 hours later, Collier received a text from Vanessa, We're going on a short trip. Don't call. His stomach clenched. A short trip? On a weekend she wasn't scheduled to travel? With no warning? He tried calling her. No answer. She sent it to voicemail immediately. He called again. Ignored. He called again. Blocked. Panic surged through him like a tidal wave. He contacted her parents. They hadn't heard from her. He called the school counselor. No response. He called Elise's personal number, something he hadn't done before. When she picked up, her voice was soft and surprised. Collier? She took her, he said, breath shaking. Vanessa took Maureen. She's not answering. Her phone is off. She sent me one message and disappeared. Elise's voice dropped to a whisper. Oh God. I don't know where they are, he said. I don't know what she's planning. Elise steadied her breathing. Okay, listen to me. You need to stay calm for Maureen. What's the last location you know? Did she mention anything earlier in the week? No, he said, pacing frantically. She was angry. But she didn't say anything like this. What did Maureen say before she left? Elise asked carefully. Collier swallowed hard. She said she felt safe here. She said she wanted to stay with me. There was silence, heavy, understanding silence. Elise knew what that meant. She knew how Vanessa must have interpreted it. She knew how emotional instability could twist a child's innocent words. Collier, Elise said gently, you need to call the police. He hesitated only a second. You're right. The moment he hung up, Collier called the police and reported the situation. Legally, Vanessa was allowed visitation, but not interstate travel without notice, and not with potential emotional instability. He explained everything. The officer on the phone responded professionally. We'll issue an alert to surrounding departments. She may still be within state lines. We'll dispatch patrol to check her residence and common travel routes. Collier didn't sit down for the next 5 hours. He paced. He called hospitals. He called highway patrol. He drove to Vanessa's apartment, pounding on the door until neighbors peeked through their blinds. He returned home with shaking hands, terrified of 1,000 possibilities. Every room felt too quiet. Every minute felt like an hour. Every second felt like a failure. He replayed the moment Maureen whispered Daddy. As Vanessa pulled her away, Elise texted him an hour later. Any updates? He typed, deleted, retyped. He didn't know how to say the truth. None. She responded instantly. I'm here if you need me. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was human, and it kept him from completely falling apart. At 10:17 p.m., his doorbell rang. Elise stood there, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, no makeup, eyes soft with concern. I know you said distance, she began quietly. But this is different. You shouldn't be alone. Collier didn't argue. Didn't pretend he was fine. Didn't say he could handle it. He stepped aside. She entered silently, the weight of the night heavy in the air around them. Elise didn't bombard him with questions. She didn't lecture him. She didn't offer empty reassurances. She sat beside him on the couch and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. She loves you, Elise said softly. She knows you're looking for her. Collier swallowed hard, tears burning behind his eyes. I failed her, he whispered. I should have seen this coming. I should have protected her. Elise shook her head immediately. No. Vanessa's pain is not your fault. You did everything right today. You called for help. You acted fast. You did exactly what a good father does. Her voice wasn't soothing to comfort him. It was soothing because it was true. And Collier held onto those words like a lifeline. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. I can't lose her, he whispered. Not again. Not like this. Elise hesitated only a second before placing her hand over his. You won't, she said with unshakable conviction. We'll find her. Maureen's coming home. Collier turned toward her, eyes wet. Her presence steadied him. Her voice anchored him. Her certainty kept him from drowning. And for the first time since Vanessa sped away with their daughter, Collier allowed himself to breathe. Not because the fear was gone, but because he wasn't facing it alone. The call came at dawn. Collier hadn't slept, not even for a moment. Elise had stayed until nearly 3 a.m., refusing to leave while he trembled between panic and exhaustion. When she finally went home, it was only after he promised he'd call the moment the police gave any update. But the update came before he could dial. His phone buzzed sharply on the glass table beside him. Unknown caller, Florida area code. His throat closed. He answered with shaking fingers. "Hello?" A firm voice replied. "Mr. Collier? This is Officer Daniels from the Orange County Sheriff's Department in Florida. We've located your daughter." The world stopped spinning. For a full second, he couldn't breathe. Is she okay?" His voice cracked. "She's safe," the officer said. "Your ex-wife was identified at a hotel outside Orlando. Your daughter is unharmed. We have her with child services now." Collier dropped to his knees in the middle of his living room. The officer continued, explaining logistics, legal requirements, travel instructions. But Collier barely processed it. All he could hear was, "She's safe. We have her unharmed." He hadn't cried like this since the day Vanessa served him divorce papers. This time they were tears of overwhelming relief. He booked the next flight out, a 6:45 a.m. departure. As he rushed around the house grabbing clothes and documents, he texted Elise only 2 words. "They found her." Elise responded instantly. "I'm praying. Call me when you land." And Collier, for the first time in 48 hours, could exhale. By the time his plane landed in Orlando, his chest was tight with anticipation, fear, and a nauseating cocktail of hope and dread. He took an Uber straight to the Child Services office, where an officer was waiting for him. The ride felt endless. When he finally arrived, he was escorted inside, past beige hallways and buzzing fluorescent lights. The officer opened a door and said gently, "She's right in here." Collier stepped inside and saw her. Maureen sat on a small sofa, knees to her chest, clutching the stuffed bunny he gave her months ago. Her eyes were puffy, cheeks blotchy, hair messy from tears and sleep. She looked much too small for the weight she'd carried. The moment she saw him, her eyes widened. "Daddy?" He broke. Completely. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered, voice trembling. "Daddy's here." She flew from the couch and into his arms with a desperate sob. He held her so tightly, he was afraid he might crush her. "I was scared," she cried. "I didn't know what was happening. Mommy kept saying we were going somewhere special, but I wanted to go home. Daddy, I wanted you." Collier closed his eyes, fighting back the tears that poured anyway. "You're safe now," he murmured. "I promise. I've got you. I'm here." She buried her face in his shirt, clinging to him with trembling hands. "I thought you'd be mad," she whispered. "I thought you'd think I left you." "Oh, baby," he whispered, lifting her chin gently. "I was never angry at you. Not for 1 second. I was worried because I love you. You didn't do anything wrong." She let out a sob of relief. It was the first time she truly believed she hadn't broken anything. The truth hit him hard. Vanessa's decision hadn't only endangered their daughter physically, it had wounded her emotionally in ways that would take time to undo. But she was here. Warm. Breathing. Safe. That was enough. They stayed like that, locked in a long, healing embrace, until a social worker knocked softly and said the necessary paperwork was ready. Within the hour, Collier signed the temporary custody documents, secured clearance to leave with Maureen, and booked the first flight back home. On the plane, Maureen curled up against him, exhausted, her small hand wrapped securely in his. He didn't let go. Not once. Back in their home state, legal consequences came swiftly. Vanessa was charged with interference with custody, violating a court order, interstate removal of a minor without consent, but the harshest punishment wasn't legal, it was emotional. For the first time in years, Vanessa was forced to sit across from a judge and hear, clearly and plainly, how her actions harmed her own child. She tried to hold herself together, but when the judge said, "Your daughter was frightened and confused. She asked repeatedly for her father, while you avoided all contact. This behavior is unacceptable," Vanessa broke down. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She didn't blame Elise this time. She just cried. Deep, trembling sobs. The cries of a woman who finally understood she had crossed a line she couldn't erase. When the judge announced temporary custody would go to Collier, Vanessa buried her face in her hands. Her actions, driven by jealousy and insecurity, had cost her the one person she loved most. She would now see her daughter only in supervised visits. The realization crushed her. As deputies escorted her out after the hearing, she avoided Collier's eyes. She didn't have the strength to look at him. She whispered only one thing, almost too soft to catch. "Please, tell her I love her." Collier didn't respond, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't trust his voice. He simply nodded. For the first time in years, Vanessa lowered her gaze and walked away. For the first few days after coming home, Maureen clung to Collier like a small shadow. She didn't want him out of her sight. She refused to sleep alone. She wouldn't take a bath unless he was nearby. She startled easily, especially when she heard footsteps outside. Her therapist explained that children often internalize fear after sudden upheaval, and that Maureen needed reassurance, consistency, and warmth. Collier provided all three. One night, a week after returning home, Maureen jolted awake at 2 a.m., screaming. He rushed into her room. She was sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "Don't let them take me again, please." Collier sat beside her and held her close, rocking gently, kissing the top of her head. "No one is taking you," he whispered again and again. "You're home, you're safe. Daddy's right here." Her sobbing eased slowly, and she fell asleep in his arms. He didn't leave her bedside the rest of the night. The next morning, he made pancakes shaped like little hearts to brighten her day. She managed a tiny smile. It was progress. Even though Elise kept a respectful distance publicly, due to the judge's order about non-family caregivers, she supported them privately in quiet, powerful ways. She cooked meals and dropped them at the front door with short notes like, "Thinking of you both today. Tell Maureen I'm proud of her strength." She helped coordinate with the school so Maureen could have lighter transitions and extra emotional support. She would call late at night, letting Collier talk through the weight of everything. She didn't push. She didn't rush him. She didn't demand anything. She simply stood by him. Steady, compassionate, present. One evening, after Maureen finally fell asleep without tears for the first time since the ordeal, Collier stepped onto his porch with his phone. He called Elise. She answered on the second ring, voice soft. "Hey, how's our girl tonight?" The way she said our girl hit him gently. "Better," he said. "She didn't have a nightmare tonight." She actually laughed at dinner. Elise let out a soft sigh of relief. "That's wonderful. She's getting her light back." "So am I," Collier admitted quietly. There was a long, warm pause on the line. "Collier," Elise said softly, "you're doing everything right. Don't doubt that." He felt something inside him settle, something that had been shaking since the moment Vanessa drove off with their daughter. "Elise," he murmured, "I don't know what I would have done without you." "I don't need credit," she whispered. "I just need you to be okay. Both of you." But he did give her credit. In his heart, he knew. Her presence had grounded him when he was on the brink. Her voice had kept him steady in the hours of fear. Her care had given Maureen a sense of security, even from a distance. Whether she realized it or not, Elise had become the emotional backbone, holding their fragile world together. 2 weeks later, the court finalized the temporary custody arrangement. Collier received full primary custody. Vanessa was allowed supervised visitation only, pending psychological evaluation. Travel restrictions were placed on both parents, with strict communication rules. The judge made it clear, "Mr. Collier, you have demonstrated stability and a safe environment. The priority is your daughter's well-being. Continue ensuring she feels secure." Outside the courtroom, Collier hugged Maureen gently, lifting her into his arms as she rested her forehead on his shoulder. "Does this mean I stay with you now?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said. "You're home with me." She nodded, relief softening her features. "And Mommy?" she whispered. "You'll still see her," he reassured. "But in a safe place, with people there to help." Maureen thought about that, then nodded again. Okay. It wasn't joy, it was acceptance. A quiet understanding, far too mature for her age. Collier kissed her hair. He promised himself one thing. He would spend the rest of his life repairing every crack, every wound, every fear she had endured, no matter how long it took. That night, Elise visited the house for the first time since the judge's warning. The restriction only applied to unsupervised caregiving, not to friendship. Maureen saw her at the door and ran into her arms, truly smiling for the first time in weeks. Elise knelt and hugged her tightly. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed you too," Maureen said, squeezing her neck. "Are you staying for dinner?" Elise looked up at Collier, unsure. He nodded. "Please," he said softly. "Stay." They ate together, quietly at first, then with growing warmth. Maureen fell asleep on Elise's lap while they watched a movie afterward. Collier looked at them, his daughter safe, Elise comforting, life beginning to stabilize, and felt a wave of profound gratitude. The worst was behind them, but the healing? The healing was just beginning. Peace doesn't arrive with a celebration. It enters quietly, soft as morning light, after a storm has torn everything apart. For Collier and Maureen, life after the rescue wasn't instantly perfect, but it was calmer. There were no sudden phone calls, no fear of Vanessa appearing unexpectedly, no tension in every conversation, no uncertainty hovering over each day. Instead, there was structure, predictability, healing. And at the core of that healing was Elise. Elise returned to their lives slowly, intentionally, with sensitivity to the fragility still lingering in the house. She didn't overwhelm them. She didn't smother the atmosphere with presence. She eased back in like someone stepping into a quiet room, aware that every sound mattered. She visited in the evenings, not as a teacher this time, but as a trusted part of their emotional world. Collier made it clear that they would follow all boundaries properly, respecting the legal situation concerning Maureen's care. Elise understood that, but she also knew healing required more than rules. It required presence and gentleness. One evening, about a week after returning from Florida, Elise arrived with a bag of small arts and crafts supplies. She knocked, lightly, never assuming entry. Maureen rushed to open the door, a spark of happiness returning to her eyes. "Ms. Elise." Elise knelt, opening her arms. "Hey, sunshine." Maureen hugged her with all the strength of a child who finally felt something steady again. "What's in the bag?" she asked with curiosity. "Something I think you'll like. We're going to make a feelings jar." Maureen tilted her head. "What's that?" "We write how you feel each day on small notes," Elise explained, "or draw them if you want. Then we put them inside the jar. At the end of the week, we read them together to see how strong you've been." Maureen smiled. "Can Daddy do it too?" Elise glanced at Collier. "If he wants to." Collier nodded softly. "I'd like that." For the next hour, the three of them sat at the dining table. Elise guided them, helping Maureen decorate her jar with stickers and sparkles. Collier watched the interaction quietly, absorbing the meaning behind her presence. Elise wasn't just comforting Maureen. She was teaching her emotional strength, structure, resilience, things Vanessa had never understood how to give. By the second week, Maureen began sleeping in her own room again. She stopped waking up screaming. She stopped asking if someone would take her again. Every improvement could be traced back to Elise's influence. Collier saw it. He treasured it. And he feared losing it. One night, after Maureen went to bed, he and Elise sat on the porch sipping warm tea. The night air was cool, and the sound of distant cars hummed softly. "Thank you," Collier said quietly. "For everything." Elise looked at him, her gaze warm and steady. "You don't have to thank me. She needed stability, and you've been giving her that." "You've been giving her that too," he said. She hesitated before speaking again. "Collier, I know you and Vanessa have history. I don't want to overstep." He shook his head. "You're not overstepping. You're helping us breathe again." Their eyes lingered on each other for a moment too long. Not romantic, not impulsive, just deeply human. A spark, but a tender one. With Elise's return came quiet transformation. Collier noticed how Maureen's posture changed. Her shoulders lifted. Her eyes brightened. Her curiosity returned. She laughed more. She asked more questions. She played again. Therapy helped, yes. Structure helped, yes. But Elise's presence brought the emotional glue that held the healing together. At school, Maureen regained her confidence. Her artwork returned to the classroom walls. She participated more in group activities. Teachers noted her progress and sent encouraging updates. At home, she practiced reading aloud with Elise, who came by twice a week. They used silly voices for the characters, voices that sent Maureen into little fits of giggles. One evening, after finishing her book, Maureen turned to Elise and said, I feel like myself again. Elise gently touched her cheek. I'm glad, sweetheart. You deserve to feel whole. Collier stood in the doorway watching, overwhelmed by gratitude. He loved this version of his daughter, not because she was cheerful, but because she was safe. And he knew safety was the foundation Elise helped restore. Healing creates space. Space creates connection. Connection creates softness. That softness slowly deepened between Collier and Elise in ways that felt gentle, respectful, and entirely grounded in reality. One evening, Collier drove Elise home because it was late and the buses had slowed for the night. The car ride was quiet, filled with a comfortable stillness neither tried to break. When he pulled up in front of her house, she lingered a moment before unbuckling her seatbelt. Thank you for the ride, she said. Always, he replied softly. She paused again, her fingers brushing the strap before she removed it. You look tired, she admitted. He smiled a little. I haven't had a real night of sleep since everything happened. She reached out, hesitating for only a moment, then placed her hand lightly over his. You're doing incredibly well, she said. Don't forget that. Her touch wasn't romantic. It wasn't suggestive. It wasn't reckless. It was grounding. Collier turned his hand over, gently holding hers. Can I tell you something? He asked. Of course. He exhaled. I didn't know how much I needed someone who listens, someone who understands without judgment. Her expression softened. You deserve that. Their hands stayed like that for a quiet moment, warm and still. Then Elise slowly withdrew, cheeks slightly flushed. Good night, Collier. Good night, Elise. The door closed softly, but the connection remained open. Meanwhile, Vanessa finally faced consequences severe enough to force change. The court mandated counseling. Not as an option, but as a requirement. Her first few sessions were spent in avoidance. She folded her arms, insisted she had simply been misunderstood, and cried when confronted with her behavior. But over time, cracks appeared. She admitted she felt replaced. She admitted she had projected insecurity onto her daughter. She admitted she had acted irrationally. Her therapist didn't coddle or criticize. He guided her through the grief she refused to acknowledge for years. The grief of losing her marriage, the grief of losing control, the grief of feeling unwanted, the grief of fearing her daughter's love was slipping away. During one pivotal session, the therapist asked, "What were you afraid of the most?" Vanessa didn't even hesitate, that she would love Elise more than me. Her voice shook with shame. The therapist nodded. And why is that so painful? Because, Vanessa whispered, I haven't felt like a good mother. And I didn't want anyone to see it. That admission cracked something open inside her. She cried, not with bitterness this time, but with release. For the first time since the divorce, she faced her own reflection honestly. And in that honesty, she found the first step toward becoming healthier. She didn't magically transform, but she began to understand herself. And that understanding would matter later, far more than she realized. By the end of the 4th chapter's first stage, Maureen was healing. Collier was calmer. Elise was becoming a quiet constant, emotionally, spiritually, and affectionately. Vanessa had taken the first real steps toward accountability. The chaos that once filled their lives had settled into something steady. And though the journey ahead held difficult conversations and emotional hurdles, one truth grew clearer with each passing day. Love wasn't chaos. Love was care. Love was consistency. Love was rebuilding what was broken with patience and honesty. Peace had entered their story, not loudly, not dramatically, but gently, through every soft step Elise took toward their lives, and every step Collier took toward finally embracing what he truly deserved. Forgiveness isn't a single step. It isn't a moment of sudden clarity. It is a slow, uneven journey made of uncomfortable truths, difficult conversations, and a willingness to stop running from the past. For Collier, forgiveness began the moment his daughter stopped waking up screaming. For Elise, forgiveness began the moment she saw Vanessa walk into supervised visitation with her shoulders lowered instead of lifted in anger. And for Vanessa, forgiveness began the moment she realized the person she needed to forgive first was herself. But none of them knew how much this stage would change their lives. 2 weeks after Vanessa began her mandatory counseling, the court scheduled a hearing to finalize structured visitation arrangements. The courtroom atmosphere this time was calmer, not peaceful, not healed, but calmer. Maureen stayed home with a sitter, while Collier attended with his attorney. Vanessa arrived with a noticeably different posture, shoulders lowered, hair pulled back simply, eyes softer, no defensive spark. She didn't glare at Elise. She didn't whisper sharply to her attorney. She didn't sit stiffly, projecting anger. She looked tired, human, recovering. The judge reviewed updates, therapist reports, child services statements, school progress notes, and Collier's fathering documentation. Everything pointed to stability in Collier's home and inconsistent emotional readiness in Vanessa's. Finally, the judge declared, "Supervised visitation is approved. 1 hour twice a week in a monitored facility. Electronic communication may be gradually allowed depending on progress." Vanessa lowered her head. Collier didn't smirk or celebrate. He simply nodded, accepting responsibility and acknowledging the gravity of the situation. When the hearing ended, Vanessa approached him slowly. Her voice was trembling. "Thank you for not fighting the supervised visits." Collier blinked in surprise. "Vanessa, I'm doing what's best for her." She nodded. "And for what it's worth," she whispered, "I understand why the court made this decision." Those were the first honest words she had spoken to him in years. A week later, the first supervised visit took place at a family services center with large windows, calming wall colors, and a monitored playroom. Collier brought Maureen, reassuring her gently along the way. At the entrance, Vanessa waited, wringing her hands nervously. When she saw them, her eyes filled with tears, not dramatic tears, not loud or performative, real silent tears. "Hi, baby," she whispered to Maureen. Maureen hesitated only a second before stepping forward. She didn't cling the way she once did, but she didn't shrink back either. Collier allowed them space, but remained fully visible, along with the monitoring staff. Vanessa sat with her daughter on the small rug. They colored, read, and played simple board games. It was cautious, quiet, but genuine. At the end of the session, as the supervisor announced time was up, Vanessa took a deep breath and approached Collier. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I need to say something." Collier kept his expression steady. Vanessa swallowed hard, eyes glistening. I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything, for the mess, for hurting her, for hurting you, for acting out of fear instead of love." Collier didn't expect to feel anything. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, not anger, but he felt something surprising: relief. Because accountability is the first breath of healing. He nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." Vanessa wiped her cheek. "I know it'll take time to regain trust. I know I pushed our daughter into fear she didn't deserve. I'm working on it." And for the first time, Collier believed her. Later that night, Collier sat beside Maureen as she colored pictures in her room. "How did it go today?" he asked gently. Maureen shrugged. Mommy was quiet. "Did she scare you?" "No," she said honestly. "She was soft." Collier smiled faintly. "Do you think she's trying to be better?" he asked. Maureen nodded, her curls bouncing slightly. "She said she wants to make things right." Collier let out a slow breath. That was enough for him. He didn't forgive Vanessa fully in that moment, but he let go of the tight grip resentment had on him. He realized holding on to anger was exhausting, and he had someone new who needed his strength. When Maureen finished coloring, she looked at him with curious eyes. "Daddy, do you feel mad at Mommy?" He thought carefully before answering. "No," he said softly. "I just want us all to be okay. I want you to feel safe and loved." She smiled and leaned her head against his arm. "You love me the right way." Those words hit him deeper than any apology could. And in that moment, Collier understood something crucial. Letting go of anger wasn't a gift to Vanessa. It was a gift to his daughter. Elise visited later that evening. Collier prepared a simple dinner: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables, while Elise helped Maureen wash her hands and pack her school bag for the next day. After dinner, Maureen went to bed early, tired from the emotional weight of the visit. Collier and Elise found themselves on the porch again, wrapped in another quiet night. Elise sipped her tea and studied him carefully. "You look different tonight," she said. "Different how?" he asked, with a tired smile. "Lighter," she answered. Like a weight shifted. He nodded slowly. I think I stopped fighting old battles, Vanessa apologized. And I realized I don't want to live angry. It's too heavy. Elise's expression softened deeply. That's maturity, Collier. That's growth, not just for Maureen, but for you. He leaned back, exhaling softly. I'm trying. You're doing more than trying, she said. You're leading with compassion. There was a pause, a warm one. Your daughter is lucky, Elise added. Collier looked at her with quiet gratitude. We both are. Their eyes held a moment that spoke louder than words. A moment filled with respect, emotional closeness, and growing affection. Not rushed, not reckless, just real. A few days later, after another supervised visit, Maureen sat in the back seat of the car swinging her legs gently. She wasn't sad. She wasn't confused. She seemed reflective. Daddy? She said softly. Yes, sweetheart. She hesitated. I want Mommy to get better. Collier glanced at her through the rearview mirror. I do too. I want her to be nice to Miss Elise, she added quietly. And I want Miss Elise to stay. Her confession pulled at his heart. Why do you want that? He asked, careful not to guide her answer. Because when Mommy is mad, everything feels sharp. She paused, searching for the right word. But when Miss Elise is around, everything feels soft. Collier breathed in deeply. Maureen continued, I want all the soft people together. A small, trembling smile formed on her lips, so we can feel soft all the time. Collier blinked, unable to stop the emotions swelling in his chest. He reached back and took her small hand in his. We'll try, he said gently. We'll really try. Promise? She asked. I promise, he whispered, and even though he didn't know exactly how to merge those worlds yet, he knew one thing: intent mattered. They were heading towards something better, something fuller, something healing. And for the first time in years, Maureen believed a peaceful world was possible. Healing sometimes needs a change of scenery, somewhere quiet, somewhere away from the noise, somewhere that lets the heart breathe again. For Collier, Elise, and Maureen, that place became the small lake house his grandparents once owned in northern Georgia. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't modern. It wasn't large. But it carried peace, and they needed peace more than anything. When Collier suggested a weekend getaway, he didn't push. He simply mentioned it during dinner one evening. I think Maureen could use a quiet weekend, he said gently. The lake house is empty. I haven't been there since college. It might help all of us reset. Elise looked at him, unsure if he meant them as a trio, or he and Maureen alone. Before she could ask, Maureen spoke first. Is Miss Elise coming? The sincerity in her voice left no room for hesitation. Collier turned to Elise with a careful expression. If you want to come, we would love that. But no pressure. Elise smiled softly. If it helps her feel safe, I'll be there. Maureen squealed and hugged her. And just like that, their healing journey took its next step. They drove up early Saturday morning. The house sat near the edge of a quiet lake, surrounded by tall pines. The water mirrored the morning sky. Still, wide, peaceful. When they stepped out of the car, Maureen gasped softly. It really is, Elise said, brushing back a strand of hair as she took in the serene view. Collier unlocked the front door, letting the familiar creak echo through the small cabin. It's not fancy, he said apologetically, but it's special. Elise smiled. Special is better than fancy. Maureen ran inside excitedly. Daddy, look. There's a big couch for movie night. Collier chuckled. That couch is older than me. Elise laughed softly. Then it's perfect. They spent the first hour opening windows, airing out the place and dusting surfaces. Elise tied a bandana around her hair as she cleaned, joking with Maureen about being the world's most serious dust hunter. Collier watched them brush cobwebs and shake out old blankets. There was something comforting about the image, a home coming alive again. A father seeing a future slowly forming, a woman giving warmth without forcing it. By noon, the lake house felt refreshed, like a new beginning. They spent the afternoon exploring the woods behind the cabin. Maureen collected smooth stones and colorful leaves, showing them proudly to Elise every few minutes. Look, this one looks like a heart. Elise knelt beside her. Then that one's special. Keep it. Collier followed behind, carrying a picnic basket he packed earlier. When they reached the clearing near the lake, they set up a small picnic blanket. Maureen ate her sandwich quickly so she could dip her toes in the water. Elise laughed and joined her, rolling up her jeans and stepping into the lake too. "It's cold," she squealed. Maureen giggled. "Daddy, come in." "I'm supervising from the shore," Collier said, with mock seriousness. Elise splashed water in his direction, a small playful gesture. "Oh really?" He smirked. "Is that a challenge?" She splashed again, just slightly, and he raised a brow. 2 seconds later, he was in the water up to his ankles, while Maureen screamed with laughter. It wasn't wild. It wasn't childish. It was simply joy. A kind of joy none of them had allowed themselves to feel in a long time. Later, they skipped stones across the lake. Elise cheered loudly when Maureen's rock managed a single bounce. "You did it," she said, lifting her up. Collier snapped a mental picture of that moment. The way Maureen's laughter echoed across the lake, the way Elise held her with such tenderness, the way peace settled around them like a warm blanket. For a moment, he saw a family, not broken pieces, not stress or fear, but a family. That night after dinner, they made hot cocoa and sat around the small fireplace in the living room. Collier told stories about his childhood visits to the lake house, stories that made Maureen giggle and Elise smile fondly. When it was bedtime, Elise tucked Maureen in. The child grabbed Elise's hand and whispered, "Can I call you something special?" Elise tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Like a nickname," Maureen said shyly. "Because you make me feel safe." Elise's eyes softened. "You can call me anything that feels right." Maureen thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "Lee." Elise froze, touched deeper than she expected. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "I love it." "Good night, Lee," Maureen murmured. Elise leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "Good night, sweetheart." When Elise stepped out of the room, Collier leaned against the hallway wall, arms crossed. "Lee?" he asked with a smile. Elise blushed. "She came up with it." "It suits you," he said quietly. The next morning, the sun filtered through the curtains in soft beams. Maureen climbed into bed between them as they were drinking coffee and half-watching cartoons. It was the first time they had ever shared such a moment. Warm, domestic, peaceful. Maureen snuggled under the blanket and said, "I had a dream." "What was it about?" Elise asked. "You and Daddy and me," she said. "We were at home, all together, happy." Collier looked at Elise, both caught off guard by the innocence of the confession. Then Maureen sat up and asked, very softly, "Daddy, can Miss Lee be my stepmom someday?" Time stopped. Elise froze. Collier's breath caught. Not because it was too soon, not because the idea scared them, but because it came from the purest place, a child who finally felt safety and love again. Elise reached out gently. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "That's a very big question, but do you want it?" Maureen asked, eyes wide, hopeful. Collier swallowed hard, choosing his next words with care. "We care about each other a lot," he said, "but grown-ups need time to make decisions like that." Maureen nodded slowly, processing. "But, would it make you happy?" she whispered. Collier reached over and pulled her into a gentle hug. "Yes," he said quietly, "it would." Elise blinked back tears. She didn't answer out loud, but her hand found Collier's under the blanket, and she didn't let go. Later that evening, after Maureen fell asleep early from playing outside all day, Collier asked Elise to step outside with him. They walked onto the small pier behind the house. The lake was calm, reflecting the moonlight like glass. Elise wrapped her arms around herself against the cool air. "Everything okay?" she asked. Collier nodded slowly. "I've been wanting to talk to you." They stopped near the edge of the pier. A soft breeze swept across the water. "Elise," he began quietly, "I don't know how you walked into our lives at the exact moment we needed you, but you did, and you brought light with you." She looked up, eyes shimmering. "Collier, you helped my daughter breathe again. You helped me believe again. I didn't think I deserved peace after everything that happened with Vanessa, but you showed me that I do." Her breath caught, and the way Maureen looks at you, the way you look at her, it feels like something real, something we can build, something we should build. Elise stepped closer. her voice barely above a whisper. I care about both of you more than I've cared about anything in a long time. He reached for her hands. Elise, I don't want you to feel like an outsider in our life. She shook her head. I don't feel like one. He breathed in deeply. I want you to be part of our family. Her eyes widened. Collier. He lowered himself slowly, carefully, onto one knee. Not scripted, not planned, not dramatic, just real. Elise, will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes instantly. She covered her mouth with her hands. A tiny gasp escaped her. She nodded, fast, overwhelmed, emotional. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. He stood, pulling her into his arms. They held each other tightly under the moonlight, the lake shimmering beside them. It wasn't a fairy tale moment. It wasn't polished. It wasn't staged. It was raw, tender, and honest. Elise rested her forehead against his. I love you, she murmured. I love you too, he whispered. As they pulled apart, they heard a small voice behind them. Daddy? They turned. Maureen stood in the doorway of the porch, sleepy-eyed, holding her stuffed bunny. Did I miss something? Elise knelt. Come here, sweetheart. Maureen walked over and climbed into Collier's arms. What were you doing? She asked curiously. Collier kissed her forehead. Something important. Is Lee staying forever? Elise glanced at Collier with emotion flooding her chest. Collier smiled softly. Yes, he said. If that's okay with you. Maureen hugged them both at once. It's perfect, she whispered. And in that moment, the wounds of Chapter 1's brokenness and Chapter 3 Feet's trauma finally found their first true closure. A new family had been born. Not from perfection, not from wealth, not from convenience, but from healing, forgiveness, and love, built slowly, carefully, honestly. The lake house had given them a new beginning, and for the first time in years, all three of them slept peacefully. The proposal changed everything, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. It came from a place of slow-built trust, healing, and genuine love. And when all three of them returned from the lake house, they carried that peace with them like a soft blanket draped around their shoulders. Summer arrived early that year, stretching long, warm days across the neighborhood. For the first time in years, Collier felt his home had a heartbeat again. A steady, warm one. Elise became an officially engaged woman. Maureen became a child with two safe homes, one emotional, one biological. Collier became a man finally stepping into his purpose. And although Vanessa wasn't healed, she had stopped causing harm. That alone shifted the entire atmosphere. The summer that followed became the foundation of the new family they were building. The first thing Elise noticed after the proposal was how differently the house felt. Nothing had changed physically. Same rooms, same walls, same furniture. But the atmosphere had transformed completely. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't filled with fear or uncertainty. It held laughter, small footsteps, and morning whispers. The summer months stretched ahead of them like a long, warm invitation. They filled it with everything they never had the chance to experience together before. Morning routines became healing rituals. Elise would come over at 8 a.m. every morning for breakfast. Maureen would help her crack eggs, usually getting more on the counter than in the bowl. And Collier would make pancakes shaped like stars or hearts because that's how special girls should eat. Maureen loved every second of it. Daddy, look, Lee taught me how to whisk. Daddy, Lee said my handwriting is getting better. Daddy, can Lee braid my hair today? The bond between Elise and Maureen deepened naturally, not forcefully, not abruptly, but with gentle moments that layered themselves into something unbreakable. Afternoons became adventures. They visited the local splash pad, the library's summer activities, the small family-owned ice cream shop downtown, and the community park where summer concerts were held every Friday at sunset. Elise would sit between them, arms wrapped around Maureen's waist, while Collier leaned back on his hands, watching the city glow under the warm evening sky. Sometimes he caught himself staring at Elise, at how effortlessly she fit into his world, his daughter's world, and even the community around them. She was accepted, welcomed, loved. Evenings grew softer. Dinner around the table, story time on the couch, board games, movie nights, quiet conversations on the porch. The house felt alive, full, warm, safe. It was the summer they all needed, and the summer none of them would ever forget. One of Elise's passions had always been literacy, especially for children who struggled to find confidence in reading. When the school announced the summer program, she was immediately invited to lead a reading workshop for early learners. But this time, Collier wasn't just an observer. He was her biggest supporter. Every morning before the program began, he helped her load books, posters, and organizers into the trunk. Sometimes he stayed for a few minutes just to watch her interact with the children in the lobby. He admired how she crouched down to their eye level, how she spoke gently but confidently, how she made even shy children feel seen. Maureen attended the reading sessions too, not because she needed help academically, but because she loved watching Elise. She sat in the front row every day, hugging her bunny or coloring quietly, smiling every time Elise praised another student. One day, Elise asked the children to share their favorite part of the day. When it was Maureen's turn, she stood and said proudly, "My favorite part is that my Lee teaches all of us." The room melted. Elise blinked back tears, and Collier, standing by the doorway, felt something shift inside him, a deeper certainty that he was building his future with the right person. Elise had dreams. She had always carried them quietly, not because they were small, but because she never had someone who genuinely cared to ask. Collier wanted to change that. Late one evening, after Maureen had gone to bed, he asked, "Elise, where do you see yourself in a few years?" She hesitated. "I love teaching," she said. "But someday, I want to open a literacy center for kids who need extra help, a safe place where every child feels seen." Collier didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. He didn't say it was unrealistic. He said, "Then let's start building toward that together." Her breath caught. "Together?" she repeated. He nodded. "Yes, I want to see you flourish. You've helped us grow. It's my turn to help you grow too." Elise looked down as her eyes filled. No one had ever seen her this clearly. No one had ever believed in her this deeply. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you," she whispered. Elise's world and Collier's world were different. Collier came from quiet wealth, subtle, understated, generational stability. Elise came from a vibrant Black community full of traditions, shared meals, loud laughter, and deep-rooted family values. Instead of clashing, their worlds blended beautifully. Sunday dinners became sacred. Elise brought her grandmother's recipes: collard greens, cornbread, baked chicken, sweet potatoes, peach cobbler. Collier added his slow-cooked dishes, fresh salads, and wine pairings. They laughed at how their cooking styles contrasted. Elise cooking with instinct, Collier with measured precision. But the end result? Magic. Quiet luxury blended with expressive culture. Elise loved taking Maureen to community hair to braiding events, local Black-owned bookstores, and youth cultural celebrations. Collier introduced them to calm weekend stays at peaceful Airbnbs, long nature walks, orchestral concerts, and subtle luxury experiences like small-town bed and breakfasts and simple countryside markets. Maureen saw both worlds not as opposites, but as pieces of her expanding identity. She would say proudly, "I have two cultures now." And she was right. Maureen absorbed everything like a sponge. From Elise's world, she learned how to braid her curls, how to cook simple soul food dishes, how to dance freely, how to celebrate community loudly and proudly, how to embrace the beauty of her mother's culture without shame or confusion. From Collier's world, she learned how to appreciate quiet moments, how to journal her feelings, how to find peace in nature, how to explore new hobbies like painting rocks and reading under trees, how to express her emotions safely. She wasn't confined to one identity. She wasn't torn between cultures. She wasn't lost in confusion. She was becoming whole, because both worlds celebrated her instead of forcing her to choose. While the new family flourished, Vanessa continued her counseling. It wasn't easy. It wasn't linear. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real work. Slowly, the bitterness faded. Slowly, the defensiveness quieted. Slowly, the resentment dissolved. She still missed Maureen deeply during supervised visits, but she began focusing less on blaming Collier and more on becoming emotionally stable for her daughter's sake. One day, after a visit, Vanessa approached Collier at the exit. "I can see she's thriving," she said quietly. "With you, With Elise, Collier turned, surprised by her calm tone. Vanessa continued, I want to respect that. I want to grow too. For her, he nodded softly. He believed her. She wasn't healed, but she was healing, and that mattered. That night, back at home, Collier watched Elise and Maureen baking cookies in the kitchen. Flour dusted their clothes. Chocolate smudged their cheeks. Laughter filled the air. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, heart full. This home, this warmth, this blending of cultures, this healing, was everything he never believed he deserved. Elise looked up and met his gaze. What? She asked with a playful smile. Nothing, he said softly. Just grateful. She walked over, wiping flour on her apron, and pressed her forehead gently against his. We're building something beautiful, she whispered. He nodded. We already have. The wedding wasn't planned with extravagance. It wasn't meant to impress anyone. It wasn't shaped by pressure or expectations. It was designed the way their love grew, quietly, sincerely, with meaning placed above spectacle. Elise had always imagined that if she ever married, it would be something simple, a heartfelt ceremony, people who truly mattered, a room filled with warmth instead of noise. When Collier proposed at the lake house, she didn't immediately picture a grand event. She pictured moments, the kind she could hold on to without feeling overwhelmed. And that's exactly what unfolded. They chose a small church just off a main road in their city, one known for its community programs, warm congregation, and the intimate feeling its sanctuary carried. When the day arrived, the sky was clear, the air warm, and the morning sun stretched over the building like a blessing. Inside the church, soft music played as a handful of guests gathered. Not a large crowd, just people who genuinely cared. Elise's family came dressed in vibrant, joyful colors. Her mother brought sweet tea in mason jars for the small reception. Her cousins teased her lovingly, calling her the calmest bride ever. Her nieces twirled around in their dresses, trying to imitate the way Elise walked with graceful poise. Collier's family arrived more understated. Classic suits, simple accessories, polite smiles. They weren't loud, but they were present. His sister complimented Elise gently. His father shook Collier's hand with quiet pride. His mother hugged Maureen and whispered, You look so beautiful today. 2 cultures, 2 families, 2 worlds. Yet the room blended seamlessly. Love made the space feel full, not the number of people. As the guests settled, something beautiful began unfolding naturally. Elise's uncle, a man with a deep baritone voice and a storyteller's aura, began chatting warmly with Collier's mother. Elise's cousin showed Collier's sister how to tie a head wrap, just for fun. Collier's father admired the artwork Elise's family brought as decorations, painted panels honoring heritage and history. It was a merging without force, a coexistence without struggle, a blend without erasure. And at the center of it all stood Maureen, in her little flower girl dress, feeling like she belonged to every corner of that room. Whenever someone spoke to her, she answered with a glow on her face, because this marriage didn't separate her world. It united it. There was an empty chair toward the back of the sanctuary, reserved, quietly, for Vanessa. Not because she was expected, not because anyone pressured her, but because forgiveness isn't about rewriting history. It's about offering space for someone to change. She didn't come. No one blamed her. Healing isn't linear, but she did send a note, attached to a small bouquet placed on the reserved seat. It read, Congratulations, Elise and Collier. Take care of each other. Thank you for loving my daughter well. Vanessa. Elise saw the note before the ceremony and rested her hand on her heart. That's incredibly mature of her, Elise whispered. Collier read it and exhaled deeply. It means she's trying, he said softly. And that's more than I expected. The note wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an attempt to insert herself into the moment. It was acceptance. Quiet, respectful acceptance. For once in her life, Vanessa stepped aside gracefully. And that, in itself, was redemption. When the ceremony began and the music shifted, Maureen walked down the aisle sprinkling petals with exaggerated concentration. Tongue pressed to her upper lip, brows furrowed as if this was the most important job of her young life. People chuckled warmly. She didn't notice, too focused on making the walkway perfect for Li Li. When she reached the front, she ran to Collier and whispered loudly, Did I do good? He kissed her cheek. You did amazing. Elise watched from the back, touched deeper than she expected. Maureen didn't just participate in the wedding. She embraced it, embraced Elise as her soon-to-be stepmother, embraced the union, embraced the healing it represented. And in that moment, Elise knew this child wasn't his daughter. She was their daughter now. When Elise walked down the aisle, the room stilled. She wore a soft, flowing ivory dress. Not extravagant, not glitzy. Simple, elegant, beautiful. Collier's breath caught. He had never seen someone look at him with as much peace as Elise did walking toward him. The officiant smiled warmly as they joined hands. The vows they wrote were short, but deeply meaningful. Elise's vow. Collier, you walked through fire before I ever entered your world. You learned how to rebuild your heart piece by piece. Not because someone taught you how, but because your daughter needed you to. When I met you, I didn't just meet a man. I met a father who would fight the world for his child. I promise to honor that love. I promise to nurture what we have. And I promise to build a life with you where peace isn't temporary. It's home. Collier's eyes shimmered. His vow. Elise, you came into our lives when everything was breaking, and you didn't try to fix us. You didn't force yourself in. You didn't fill the empty spaces with noise. You brought calm. You brought healing. You brought a gentleness I didn't know I needed. You gave my daughter safety again, and you gave me hope again. I promise to protect what we're building. I promise to choose you every day, and I promise to honor the love that brought us here. Not rushed, not easy, but real. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the officiant wiped his eyes discreetly. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the applause echoed through the small church. It wasn't loud because of numbers. It was powerful because of sincerity. Collier kissed Elise gently. She held his face with both hands. Their foreheads touched. They breathed the same breath. A moment of completion. A moment of new beginnings. Maureen ran up to them, hugging them both. We did it, she said, giggling. Elise laughed softly. Yes, sweetheart, we did. Are we a real family now? Maureen asked. Collier cupped her cheek. We always were, he answered. But today, we made it official. Elise lifted Maureen into her arms. We're in this together, she whispered. And just like that, the circle of healing closed, and a new circle of love opened. At the reception, small, warm, intimate, there was no DJ, no extravagant spread. Just music from a Bluetooth speaker, homemade foods, shared laughter, and genuine joy. Collier danced with Elise slowly, swaying gently. He kissed her forehead. She rested her head on his chest. Maureen danced around them holding her bunny, giggling. And in the middle of that little church hall, surrounded by two families that were once strangers, a new family, built on healing, redemption, and deep love, began living its truth. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes, real is better than perfect. A quiet morning stretched across the lake house porch as summer slowly faded into early fall. Dew clung to the wooden rails, glistening under the rising sun. Inside, the house was gradually waking up, soft footsteps, faint humming, and the comforting rhythm of a family learning peace after years of storms. Hey family, if you're still here with me, this is a great moment to tap that like button and leave a comment. It helps more people find stories with lessons that heal and strengthen us. Thank you. Time didn't heal everything immediately, but it softened edges, filled gaps, and turned aching wounds into reminders of how far they had come. Collier had changed. Not just as a father, not just as a man learning how to show love without conditions, but as a human being who finally understood the cost of emotional absence. He shifted from the relentless work pace that once consumed him. He chose consulting work that allowed him to be present. He chose breakfasts with Maureen over early morning boardroom calls. He chose slow weekends with Elise over the rush he once mistook for achievement. And Elise, her presence shaped the home in gentle strength. She built routines with intention, filled the house with warmth, and maintained that steady compassion the family had come to rely on. Maureen thrived under that stability. Not the forced everything is perfect kind of stability, but the real comforting kind where a child knows she can cry, ask questions, laugh loudly, and still feel loved without fear. Now 8 years old, she had grown taller, more confident, and more open emotionally. She no longer flinched when conversations grew serious. She no longer carried guilt like a shadow. She asked questions, sought reassurance, expressed joy freely. Everything she was once too scared to do. One morning at breakfast, Maureen sat at the kitchen island, swinging her legs while Elise stirred oatmeal on the stove. "Mommy Elise," she asked softly, "what do you think I'll look like when I'm older?" Elise smiled without turning from the stove. "Beautiful, strong, and probably too tall for your own good." Maureen giggled. "What about when I'm grown up?" Grown? Collier took a sip of coffee and leaned on the counter. "You'll look like someone who knows who she is, and that's better than any hairstyle or outfit." Maureen paused. "You think so?" "I know so," Collier replied. And the child believed him, because his voice didn't carry the fear or hesitation it once did. It carried assurance, the kind he was still learning to give consistently, but learning well. Her school counselor once told Collier and Elise that children who face early emotional conflict sometimes struggle with self-esteem later, but that wasn't Maureen. The healing work they invested in her had blossomed. She read confidently. She excelled in science. She played violin, even though she admitted she didn't like practicing. She made friends easily. But her greatest strength was empathy. One afternoon, Elise walked into the living room and found Maureen kneeling beside her stuffed animals, arranging them in a circle. Some were crying, others were worried, and she was comforting each one individually. "Honey, what's going on here?" Elise asked gently. Maureen looked up. "My animals had a bad day, so I'm helping them talk about it." Elise placed her hand over her heart. "Where did you learn that?" "From you," she said simply. "And from Daddy." Elise blinked back sudden tears. Collier walked past at that moment, pausing when he overheard. From him. A man who once couldn't understand why his daughter cried in silence. A man who once missed the signs because work pulled his attention away. She learned comfort. From him. He crouched down beside her. "You're doing a good job, Peanut." Maureen stood, wrapped her arms around both of them and whispered, "I like who we are." Elise tightened her embrace. "I do too." It was a small sentence, but it carried the weight of healing. This was the result of the journey. Every hardship, every painful chapter, every fall, every rebuild, leading them to a place where love didn't feel complicated. It felt like home. With healing often comes quiet reflection, and Collier felt it most strongly during the calmest moments. Sometimes late at night, after Elise and Maureen fell asleep, he would sit on the back porch of the lake house, looking out over the moonlit water. The gentle ripples, the sound of crickets, and the stillness of the air pulled him into thoughts he once avoided. He thought about Vanessa's breakdowns, her jealousy, her fear, her anger. He thought about the court hearings, the accusations, the moment she tried to take Maureen away. The nights Maureen woke up sobbing from nightmares, and he thought about the guilt, the kind that didn't disappear with time, the kind that reminded him how dangerous emotional absence can be. He once believed stability meant money, structure, a roof, a school, a schedule. Now he understood. Stability is presence, love, patience, repair, responsibility, showing up even on the days you don't feel strong, especially on those days. Elise sometimes joined him on the porch when she couldn't sleep. One night, she placed a blanket over his shoulders and sat beside him. "You're thinking again," she said softly. He chuckled. "Is it that obvious? You get quiet in a very specific way." He looked at her. "Do you ever think about the past?" She nodded, not to stay in it, but to appreciate where we are now. He exhaled slowly. "I still feel guilty sometimes." "That means you care," she replied. "Just don't let guilt rewrite who you've become." He looked into her eyes, steady, grounding, kind. She didn't erase his pain. She reframed it, turned it into something valuable, turned it into growth. And that was why he loved her, not for how she healed him. If this part of the journey is touching your heart, take a moment to like this video. It helps the channel grow, and it tells YouTube that stories like this matter. And if you're feeling brave, drop a comment about a moment in your life that taught you resilience. The story continued effortlessly. Elise had a way of simplifying complex emotions without dismissing them. She didn't preach. She didn't sugarcoat. She didn't pretend everything happened for a reason. She simply offered perspective. One afternoon, while they were all preparing dinner, Maureen asked a question no one saw coming. "Do you think our family started because everything went wrong before?" Collier paused, holding a cutting board. Elise froze mid-stir. It was the kind of question that reflected a child who remembered more than adults assumed. Elise knelt in front of her. "No," she said gently. "Our family didn't start because things went wrong." Maureen blinked. "Then how did it start?" Elise smiled. "It started because people chose to grow instead of give up. Because Daddy learned how to love in a healthier way. Because Vanessa learned how to let go. Because you learned how to trust again. And because I learned how to open my heart when life gave me a chance I didn't expect." Maureen absorbed that quietly. "So it didn't start with pain?" she whispered. Elise shook her head. "It started with courage." Collier swallowed hard. He placed his hand on Elise's shoulder, grateful beyond words. That night, after dinner and a movie, Maureen grew unusually quiet. Not sad, just thoughtful. She excused herself and went to her room. Elise waited a few minutes before checking on her. When she peeked in, she found Maureen kneeling beside her small desk, markers spread everywhere, tongue poking through her lips in concentration. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Maureen didn't look up. "Just something important." Elise smiled softly. "Okay, let me know if you need anything." Collier joined Elise in the hallway. "What's going on?" "She's creating something," Elise whispered. "I think it's special." Neither of them knew how special, but they would soon. Night settled gently over the lake house. The hum of cicadas filled the warm air, and the soft glow from the hallway lights spilled into Maureen's bedroom. When Elise and Collier walked in together, they found their daughter asleep on top of her blankets, one hand resting under her cheek, the other wrapped tightly around a sheet of paper colored with markers. Collier whispered, "She didn't even make it under the covers." Elise smiled softly. "Let's tuck her in." When Elise lifted the blanket to place it over her, the paper slipped from under Maureen's hand and fluttered to the floor. Elise reached for it and froze. Her breath caught. "Collier," she whispered, voice uneven. He stepped closer and looked down at the drawing in her hands. It wasn't messy scribbles. It wasn't random coloring. It was a scene. Simple, pure, deeply intentional. In the drawing, 3 figures stood holding hands. Daddy, Mommy, Elise, me. Above them was a crooked little sun with a smiley face. And at the bottom, in Maureen's careful handwriting, were 2 words. "My family." Collier exhaled shakily, emotion swelling in his chest. This small page, this innocent picture, carried more weight than anything he had faced in years. It wasn't just a drawing. It was the final confirmation that they had rebuilt something whole, something strong, something meant to last. Elise pressed her fingers over her lips, tears collecting in her eyes. She didn't cry from sadness. She cried from the quiet, overwhelming realization that Maureen, after everything, felt secure enough to claim them both as her own. "I didn't think," Elise whispered, voice trembling. Collier wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You earned this, every bit of it." "No," she said, shaking her head softly. "We earned it." He nodded, pulling her closer as they watched their daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in many years. No tension in her face, no fear in her breathing, no shadows lingering behind her dreams. Just peace. And finally, family. They stood together in the quiet room, and for a few long moments, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Collier brushed his hand through Elise's hair and whispered, "Do you remember how this all started? How messy everything was?" "I remember," Elise replied softly. "But I also remember how much stronger you became, how much stronger she became, and how much we fought to get here." Collier's eyes drifted back to the drawing. "There were nights I thought we'd never see a day like this," he admitted. "I thought she'd always carry the pain of what happened between Vanessa and me." Elise lifted her hand and placed it over his heart. "Children don't need perfect parents. They need present ones, loving ones, safe ones. You became that father, and you became her anchor." Elise shook her head gently. "Her anchor is you, Collier. I just helped her see the good in you again." He rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. They stood like that, quiet, connected, grounded, while Maureen slept peacefully behind them, hugging her drawing as though it were her most precious treasure. And maybe it was, because it wasn't just a drawing, it was her truth. The truth she believed in. The truth Her heart finally felt safe enough to claim. Later that night, when they returned to their room, Collier wrapped Elise in his arms and whispered into her hair, "You saved us." Elise shook her head, pressing her face into his chest. "No, Collier. We saved each other." He held her tighter, knowing she meant it, knowing she saw him not as the broken man he once was, but as the man he chose to become. The next morning, sunlight filtered in through soft curtains. Maureen padded into their room still half asleep, climbed into the bed between them, and curled against Elise's side. "Did you see my drawing?" She mumbled sleepily. Elise brushed her fingers through her hair. "We did, sweetheart. It's beautiful." Collier kissed the top of her head. "It means everything to us." Maureen grinned sleepily, snuggling deeper into the blankets. "I made it because I like our life." Elise and Collier looked over her small head, their eyes meeting with the kind of love that doesn't need words. This was the full circle. This was the journey completed. Not because everything became perfect, but because everything became honest. A family formed not out of convenience or force, but out of choice, out of growth, out of healing. And for the first time in years, Maureen's heart was free. Family isn't always built the way people expect. Sometimes it's rebuilt, sometimes it's repaired, sometimes it's formed in the middle of storms. What matters is choosing love over fear, truth over silence, and healing over blame. If this story touched you in any way, let's talk about it. What part hit you the hardest? What lesson did you take with you? Before you go, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that remind people they're not alone, that healing is possible, and that love can rebuild the parts of us life tried to break. Thank you for watching Mr. Michael Stories. Until next time, take care of your heart, take care of your family, and let love lead you home.